Chapter 4026. Zichen had no idea what was going on. He had no idea at all. Everyone was running away in fear. Ghost! What was that? Was it his pet? Grandpa, my dear Grandpa, do you want to die again? While Zichen was still in a daze, Li Haoqing came up to him, grabbed Zichen, and ran away. Zichen noticed that the old man was strong and his steps were agile. Instinctively, he followed the old man's lead. Zichen wanted to look back and see if all the ghosts were his pets. But when he looked back, Zichen was dumbfounded. That wasn't a ghost, it was a demon. It was running toward them and chasing after them. Its speed was not slow either. It caught up with a person in a few jumps. It opened its mouth and inhaled. The person, who was frantically running away under the influence of inertia, fell to the ground after running for another 10 or so steps. Zichen saw that the ghost had devoured that person's soul. The other party paused, and a look of enjoyment and intoxication appeared on his face. Ghost devouring soul! Zichen exclaimed out of instinct. But he didn't know why he would shout like that. Run! Lord Ghost is here to hunt. If it catches up to you, you will die. Li Haoqing loudly reminded Zichen. At the same time, he pulled Zichen back. Zichen ran as well. The scene of the ghost devouring soul lingered in his mind for a long time. They climbed over the mountain and ran into the distance. The underworld, ghost behind them, after devouring 5 people, gave up the chase and quickly disappeared. Everyone stopped in their tracks, looking as if they had just survived a calamity. What is going on? Zichen looked at Li Haoqing, who was gasping for breath. Tell me, where is this place? This is Lord Ghost's hunting ground. Zichen, have you forgotten everything? Li Haoqing looked at Zichen. Zichen said angrily, Old man, don't joke around with me. I'm asking you, where is this place? Zichen was infuriated, but at the same time he was also nervous. That was because he had tried to use his soul force to save those who might have died, but he found that his body was empty. There was no soul power at all. Furthermore, as he looked at them, he discovered that none of them had any soul power in their bodies. Li Haoqing said, This is the land of boulders and also the hunting ground of Lord Yugui. We have lived here since we were born. Zichen said, In that case, we are all prey, and that guy from before is the hunter. Li Haoqing nodded. Zichen asked, How many years have you lived here? Li Haoqing said, Years? What's that? How long have you lived here? There have been many sunrises. I can't remember clearly. Li Haoqing chuckled. For us, it's considered a gain. Zichen asked again, What about me? How long have I lived here? Li Haoqing thought for a moment and said, More than 6,000 sunrises, right? More than 6,000 sunrises, which should be less than 20 years. This made Zichen feel extremely incredulous. His consciousness was still in Blood Battle City. Calculating the time, it shouldn't have been that long, right? Zichen couldn't believe it, so he found someone who knew him and asked about his situation. In the end, the news was not much different from Li Haoqing's. His parents were probably eaten by the underworld ghost around the 4,000 sunrise. After that, he followed Li Haoqing, who was everyone's grandfather, and relied on each other for survival. Of course, most of the time they were running away. Until the last time Lord Yugui went out to hunt, Zichen accidentally tripped on a large rock, fell to the ground, and fainted. Li Haoqing carried the unconscious Zichen on his back and began his life of escape until Zichen woke up not long ago. Zichen looked at Li Haoqing. The other party didn't seem to be lying, but why didn't he have any recollection of what had happened in the past? Or rather, after leaving Blood Battle City and coming to this world, he really lived in a muddle-headed state for 20 years and only woke up recently? Of course, in Zichen's heart, there was actually another guess, and that was that Bloody Battle City and the Saint Spirit Realm were actually just a dream. In the dream, he was omnipotent and had the title of invincible. Now, he had just woken up from the dream and seen the reality. Another 2 sunrises passed, and Zichen no longer dreamed. He slowly got used to this reality. Moreover, He found that his memories of the dream world seemed to have become blurry. Right now, he couldn't tell which was the real world. Illusion, I know it's all an illusion. Li Haoqing found another cave, and the two of them lived in it. At this moment, Zichen looked at the natural cave and couldn't help but sneer. Li Haoqing stood to the side and shook his head and sighed. I'm here to find something. I don't have time to play with you. Disappear. Zichen raised his voice. It seems that you really are sick. Li Haoqing whispered, Fortunately, it's not a big problem. Illusion array dispel. Zichen's hands formed a seal, and then he shouted in a low voice. Naturally, there was no reaction. Li Haoqing said, Actually, some people have also suffered from this disease. It is said that when they are frightened or stimulated, they start to talk nonsense and then act abnormally. However, it is not life-threatening. As long as you get used to it for a while, you will recover. Zichen glanced at Li Haoqing. The other party's words were very sincere, and his attitude didn't seem to be fake. However, Zichen was the only one who maintained absolute rationality. Even now, he still firmly believed that everything in his mind was not a dream. Instead, it had really happened. The second hunt of the underworld ghost came quickly, and everyone continued to flee. This time it was necessary for Li Haoqing to remind Zichen to start running. It wasn't until the underworld ghost was full and left that everyone stopped again. Zichen didn't see any expression on everyone's face. It was as if they had already become numb to this kind of life. Li Haoqing handed over a few fruits and motioned to Zichen to fill his stomach first so that he would have the strength to escape. Why don't we leave here? Zichen looked at Li Haoqing and asked the question in his heart. We can't leave at all. Li Haoqing took Zichen and ran into the depths. When they reached the end, Zichen finally understood why they couldn't escape. A wall appeared in his field of vision. It was very tall, nearly 100 feet high. The wall was smooth and there was no stress point. Here, everyone is an ordinary person. How can they jump over it? When did this wall appear? Zichen asked. It has been passed down from generation to generation. It is said that it has been here for a long time. Li Haoqing said, No one knows what is outside the wall. Zichen stood in front of the wall and began to stare blankly. At this moment, his memory was a little chaotic. He remembered that he came here to find something, but he forgot what it was. Moreover, the bloody battle city that was still fresh in his memory seemed to only have a name left. He had forgotten a lot of things in the bloody battle city, but he could vaguely remember a few names. Even at some time, Zichen's heart would have some kind of illusion. Could it be that he really lived in this place? Could it be that the things in his memory were really just a dream? At this moment, a clear voice suddenly sounded. What is your name? Do I know you? Zichen turned around and saw a familiar girl standing there, but Zichen couldn't call out her name. However, this kind of familiarity made him feel a little closer. My name is Zichen. The girl said, My name is Qing Yi. Zichen's eyes lit up. He finally remembered a name that was about to disappear from his memory. You are Qing Yi. Qing Yi also seemed to recognize Zichen. Are you really Zichen? Then, the two of them walked forward. When they saw each other, they were very excited. Clearly, Qing Yi's appearance made Zichen realize that what had happened back then was real and not a dream. What else can you remember? The two of them sat down against a mountain wall. Qing Yi immediately asked, I can still remember Bloody Battle City, Saint Spirit Realm, Shanya, Langumeng, Wanhe, and those people. What about you? Zichen said a few names in a row. Xiao Shang, Old Man, Soul Hunter, Soul Devourer, and Sea Race. Qing Yi rarely interacted with outsiders, but she still remembered the three races clearly. Then the two of them checked and filled in the gaps. Each of them said some things in order to not let that memory disappear. Li Haoqing stood in the distance. Hearing the two of them speak excitedly, he muttered, So stupid. You really took the things in your dream for real. Who doesn't know how to dream? I even dreamed that I was a hall master. That seemed to be a very high official. Old man, what did you say? Zi-Chen heard the old man's muttering and turned around to ask. Nothing. Li Haoqing replied. He didn't want to embarrass himself, so he didn't say anything about the dream. In fact, the memory of his dream had long been blurred. Right now, he could only remember some insignificant things. Do you remember why we came here? Zi-Chen looked at Qing Yi and asked. We came here to find something, but I can't remember what it is. Qing Yi said, It seems that this place is completely different from what we expected. After coming here, we seem to have a new identity. It's as if we really live here. Also, the other people here are all witnesses. Everyone's words are exactly the same. Zi-Chen nodded. He had also asked many people. Although there were some discrepancies because of the angle, this was more proof of the truth of the matter. Zi-Chen said, Now, I'm also wondering if we really stayed here for decades after coming here. It's just that in these decades, our memories haven't awakened. We've always been muddle-headed until now. Whether it was Zi-Chen or Qing Yi, neither of them had any childhood memories. However, the others had, and they spoke of it in a methodical manner. In other words, before they woke up, Zi-Chen and Qing Yi had been like walking corpses, living in this world for decades. Chapter 40:27. The two of them talked about all kinds of possibilities and guesses. This place was really an unknown place. Qing Yi said, Is it possible that this is an illusion and everyone's memories are fake, made up out of thin air? After the two of them discussed, this possibility existed and was very big. Li Haoqing and the others were part of the illusion. In fact, they were all illusions, and only the two of them were real. Okay, we should go back. If we don't stay with everyone, the chances of survival will be lower. Looking at the direction of sunset, Li Haoqing got up and said, I'll go with you. Qing Yi said without hesitation. The two of them came together, so it was natural for them to stay together. This way, it would be more convenient for them to do things. Zi-Chen didn't have any objections. He needed Qing Yi's reminder. Or rather, he needed the two of them to keep reminding each other. The old man chuckled and laughed foolishly. The way he looked at Qing Yi changed, as if he was looking at his granddaughter-in-law. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. The people who came in before might not be lost, but dead. While moving forward, Qing Yi said with a heavy heart, Although the underworld ghosts here don't feel strong, they are invincible. Without soul power, we can't resist those underworld ghosts at all. Those underworld ghosts? Zi-Chen asked. Are there many of them? It seems that you didn't look carefully. The underworld ghosts that hunt are actually different. If you look carefully, there are some subtle differences. Qing Yi said, This means that there is more than one underworld ghost. It might be a group. Li Haoqing returned and was very proud. When the others saw Qing Yi with Zi-Chen, they all understood why he was so proud. Some even began to congratulate him. Why did we come back here? Looking at the familiar cave, Zi-Chen asked curiously. If we don't stay here, where else can we go? Li Haoqing asked. Zi-Chen said, If we stay here, the underworld ghosts will come again. But once Lord Underworld Ghost finishes hunting, we will be safe. Zi-Chen was speechless at Li Haoqing's explanation and was too lazy to argue with him. Qing Yi entered the cave and said, Zi-Chen, have you observed carefully? What? Zi-Chen asked in confusion. This world seems to have developed on its own. Everyone has their own thoughts, just like the most realistic human beings. It's not just formed around the two of us. Qing Yi looked up at Zi-Chen and said, I suspect that this is a real world. Zi-Chen said, If this is the real world, then what are the two of us? We know nothing about this place, and there is no information about this world in our memories. Qing Yi continued, Is it possible that in this world there is indeed another Zi-Chen and Qing Yi, but our arrival has taken over their bodies. Zichen smiled and said, "That's too much nonsense. Why don't you say that the two of us are actually living in this world and that we were just dreaming before? But unfortunately, we had a dream of having each other." Qing Yi suddenly lowered her head because it was not impossible. Her memories had been distorted long ago, and she could no longer distinguish between which was an illusion and which was real. Li Haoqing sat next to them and did not say a word. Anyway, they were talking nonsense in their own home, and no one could hear it, so it did not matter. But he suddenly thought of something, so he reminded them, "You are really dreaming, and you will soon forget the things in your dreams. So, just talk about it here, but don't go out and talk nonsense." Qing Yi heard this and said, "What do you think?" Zichen said with certainty, "I believe that everything in our minds is real, even if the memories are a little vague." Qing Yi said, "If you believe that it is real, then let's remember everything, lest we forget everything." Okay. The two of them planned to write down their memories with words. Zichen found a colored stone and handed it to Qing Yi. Qing Yi suddenly said, "Our memories are different, so let's write down our own memories." Zichen nodded and did not have any objections. He began to write on the other side of the cave, "I am Zichen from Bloody Battle City. I have friends there, one named Shanya, one named Lan Gumeng, one named Wan He, and one named Ghost Spirit. Today, I met Qing Yi, so it turns out that we knew each other before, and we came to this world at the same time for the same thing. But our memories seem to be distorted, and we have forgotten the purpose of coming here." On the other side, Qing Yi also wrote down Xiaosheng's name, her master, Zichen, and the 3 clans. After writing, the two of them were very satisfied. After sunset, Li Haoqing suddenly walked out of the cave, and before he left, he winked at Zichen, feeling a little strange. Zichen and Qing Yi sat side by side, and the two of them tried hard to recall the things in their memories, worried that they would forget. Time passed, and the two of them finally fell asleep. The sun rose in the east. Sunlight shone in from the entrance of the cave, and Zichen opened his eyes. He slept very comfortably last night and did not have any dreams. He stretched his back. Then he felt someone beside him. "Qing Yi." Zichen recognized Qing Yi, so he called out. Qing Yi opened her beautiful eyes, and she also recognized Zichen, so she smiled. "What do you remember?" Zichen asked. "Did you dream of anything?" Qing Yi shook her head. "Same as yesterday. Let's take a look at our memories." Zichen looked to the side of the cave where he had written yesterday. After seeing the content, Zichen smiled, because what was written was the same as what he remembered now. He indeed remembered those friends. Qing Yi also looked at the content she had written, and she seemed very satisfied. "What are we going to do today?" Qing Yi asked. "Let's see if there are any other paths." As they spoke, Li Haoqing walked in. Zichen asked, "Where did you go yesterday?" Li Haoqing did not reply, but looked at Qing Yi as if he wanted to see something from her face. "We're going out. Don't touch the things here." Zichen pointed at the words, worried that Li Haoqing would not listen. So he said sternly, "I'm telling you, old thing, if you dare to erase it, I'll beat you up." Li Haoqing waved his hand and said, "Got it, go, go." The two of them left with peace of mind. Li Haoqing stayed there, and he had other thoughts and plans in his mind, so he did not care about the words left by Zichen. When they left, several people greeted Zichen. Zichen didn't know them, so he just nodded his head in acknowledgement. The two of them walked down the mountain. Along the way, Qing Yi carefully observed her surroundings. There were fruit trees at the foot of the mountain, and Zichen picked some fruits for the two of them to eat. The two of them once again came to the tall and smooth wall from yesterday. Zichen looked up at the wall and murmured, "How can we climb over it? If it was before, we could just fly over it." Qing Yi said, "It's not easy to go over now." The two of them walked along the wall, looking for other discoveries. After walking for a while, Zichen suddenly asked, "What are we looking for here?" Qing Yi thought seriously, but she could not think of anything. I'm not sure, but we should be looking for something. Zichen said. It seems that our memory has deteriorated. Qing Yi nodded in agreement. Right now, she could only choose to believe that the things in her dream were real, and that she came to this world to find something, and that she had a mission. Otherwise, she would really lose her mind and become the same as the others here. The two of them returned to the cave and saw that Li Haoqing had prepared a lot of fruits. After Qing Yi came in, he immediately handed them to her. Qing Yi thanked him and took them. Zichen picked up a stone next to him and said, It seems that we have to write down what happened every day so that we don't forget everything. Zichen walked to the side and wrote. Qing Yi put down the fruit and also wrote on her side. When Li Haoqing saw this, he couldn't help but shake his head. However, he didn't say anything. Even if they were tormenting each other, there would be a time when they would stop. Maybe at that time, he would be able to hold a great-grandchild. This was what Li Haoqing was focused on. A new day, the ghost came. It seemed to be hungry, and it quickly rushed into the crowd, devouring one life after another. Zichen looked at the ordinary people struggling to fall to the ground, and a soul flew out from their body and was devoured by the ghost. It had been half a month since they arrived here. According to the language of this place, that was 15 sunrises. Zichen was already used to the appearance of the ghost, but after Qing Yi told him about it, he carefully observed the ghost and found that it was indeed different from one another. Every time the ghost devoured a soul, it would pause for a moment, and at that time it would be very intoxicated, as if it was enjoying some kind of delicious meal. After devouring 6 people in a row, the ghost laughed and left. Its laughter was no different from that of a human's. Zichen stood in the distance, watching the ghost leave. After that, he and Qing Yi also left, continuing to look for something. Day after day, in this place, only sunrises and sunsets. Every day, when Zichen and Qing Yi woke up and were not being devoured by the ghost, they would go out. As for why they went out, or what they were looking for, the two of them had already forgotten. They only knew that they came here to look for something, but they did not know what it was. And so they could only continue to look for it day after day, not knowing when it would end. On a new day, the underworld ghost came to hunt. Zichen and Qing Yi escaped. Every time, the ones who were devoured were either the elderly who had slowed down or those who had not been able to escape in time. Some were simply unlucky. Zichen stood in the distance, quietly watching the ghost eat its fill, then laugh and leave. It's safe, let's go. Zichen turned his head and glanced at Qing Yi. Unexpectedly at this moment, Zichen noticed that Qing Yi was standing in the same place, motionless, and her eyes were full of horror. Zichen slowly turned his head, trying not to make any sound. 2 feet away from him stood a ghost, the second ghost. Chapter 4028. Zichen held his breath. He had been here for a long time, but he was still so close to Yugui. It was the first time he was targeted by Yugui. Yugui just stood there without moving, but there was a strong oppressive aura that made Zichen breathless. In an instant, his dormant memories seemed to be awakened. His fingers trembled as if he was about to clench his fists and form a seal. Run, why aren't you running? Yugui looked at the two and grinned. I saw that you too were the best at running. Now you want to run. Zichen's eyes widened as if he saw something incredible. Zichen, run. At this moment, a loud roar came from behind and forcibly pulled Zichen's consciousness over. It was Li Haoqing. After seeing Zichen's abnormality, he ignored his own safety and shouted out a warning. Zichen, who came back to his senses, immediately ran to the side. Just as he moved, Yugui also moved. Zichen tapped the ground with his feet and leaped into the air. He leaped forward and hugged Qing Yi. Qing Yi, who was stunned, was pushed down by Zichen. The two rolled down the mountain. Yugui, who jumped up, landed on the ground, splashing some sand and stones. It glanced at the two people rolling down the mountain. Its eyes changed slightly, like a child looking at an ant under its feet. It originally planned to stomp it to death, but who knew that the ant would suddenly change direction and dodge? At this time, the child often had two choices. The first was to chase the ant until it was completely stomped to death. The second was to change to a target that was close enough to be stomped to death. The Yugui in front of him was like a child. It chose the latter. It jumped lightly in front of the other person, opened its mouth, and swallowed. Ziqin and Qing Yi hugged each other and rolled down the mountain. His clothes were even more tattered, and there were many scratches on his body. Qing Yi was slightly better than Ziqin. After the two landed, they didn't care about anything else and got up to run. That moment was the closest the two of them had ever come to death since they came to this world. However, this was also an accident because there had never been a situation where two ghosts appeared at the same time. Ziqin and Qing Yi had run far away. Naturally, the ghost wouldn't give up on what was near for what was far away, especially after it started to devour souls. After devouring enough souls, the hunting ghost left in satisfaction. Li Haoqing caught up with them and said, "You two are so lucky. You actually rolled down from the mountain. If I hadn't fallen, I would have been finished this time." He paused and said, "We can't wait any longer. Tonight, let me hold my great-grandson. In this place, accidents might happen at any time." Qing Yi's face blushed. She clearly knew what Li Haoqing was talking about. In fact, she had long understood why Li Haoqing would leave the cave every night, leaving the two of them alone. Ziqin ignored Li Haoqing. He looked at Qing Yi and asked, "Are you okay?" The blush on Qing Yi's face had yet to dissipate. She slowly shook her head. "Let's go up and take a look." Ziqin held Qing Yi's hand and walked back to the original path. Li Haoqing followed. "Hey, can you at least give me a quick answer?" Along the way, everyone was panting. Obviously, they were very tired. Everyone had long been numb to the ghost hunting. Just a moment ago, when the ghost left, the survivors started to joke around. But there were also some sad people who lost their loved ones. They were crying in front of the corpses. The atmosphere was a bit sad. After crying, they had to pull themselves together to face the next hunt. Ziqin walked in front of the crowd with an expressionless face. His mood was a bit heavy. In his original vague memory, only some unintelligent beasts were the targets of hunting. He didn't expect that in this place humans would be hunted by beasts. With walls around them, they were like food in captivity, waiting to be harvested at any time. "What are you taking me to see?" Qing Yi asked puzzledly. Ziqin pulled Qing Yi to the place where the two of them fell. He looked at a stone on the ground. There was a little blood at the tip of the stone. "What is that?" Qing Yi also saw this and asked doubtfully, "The blood of the ghost. I noticed before that its foothold might be here." Ziqin walked in front of the stone and said in a deep voice, "It seems that it's just faster and stronger, but it's still made of flesh and blood." Qing Yi's expression changed. "What do you mean?" Ziqin's eyes flashed with a touch of coldness. "Let's try and see if we can kill one." "Are you crazy? If we kill one ghost, it will anger the whole tribe." Qing Yi said, "And didn't you see it yourself? There were two underworld ghosts just now. If we don't kill them, one day we will be the ones to die." Ziqin said solemnly, "Are we going to keep running? How long do we have to run? Do you have any ideas?" Qing Yi looked at Ziqin. "Not yet, but it's still made of flesh and blood. There should be a way to kill it." Originally, in Ziqin's uncertain memory, there were many kinds of weapons. Now, even if there was one, Ziqin would want to fight it, but unfortunately there was nothing. "By the way, what the ghost said before, did you hear it?" Ziqin suddenly remembered what the ghost said before. What did it say?" Qing Yi asked puzzledly. "You didn't hear it?" Ziqin was a little surprised because the ghost's voice was very loud. Qing Yi shook her head. indicating that she didn't hear it. Zi Chan repeated the underworld ghost's words. Qing Yi was shocked. She didn't expect the other underworld ghost to have already noticed them. However, she shook her head again and again, indicating that she didn't hear anything. Maybe because she was nervous, Qing Yi didn't hear it. Of course, it could also be Zi Chen's hallucination. On this day, Zi Chen and Qing Yi still went out looking for something. When they returned, Li Haoqing had already prepared a lot of fruits. When he saw the two of them come in, he took the initiative to leave. At the same time, he gave Zi Chen an encouraging look, which made Zi Chen speechless. Qing Yi fell into a deep sleep, and Zi Chen fell into deep thought. If they couldn't find what they were looking for, then they would definitely stay here in the future. However, after experiencing what happened today, Zi Chen felt that they could die at any time. Today, they were lucky enough to change the ghost's target. If they encountered the same thing again, would they still be so lucky? The next day, just as the sky was about to brighten, a scream of horror sounded. The ghost was coming again. There were already 2 of them yesterday, and they didn't expect another one to come today. Zi Chen pulled Qing Yi and continued to run. During this time, Qing Yi looked back at the distance. Zi Chen asked, "How is it?" Qing Yi said, "It's not the 2 from yesterday." Soon, the ghost devoured enough souls and left satisfied. Zi Chen, who was still hesitating, finally made up his mind. He called Qing Yi and began to check the geographical environment. This was the first time Zi Chen didn't aimlessly search for something he didn't know about after coming to this world. Qing Yi saw Zi Chen's intention and said, "Are you really going to attack the ghost?" "We have to try, or we will die sooner or later," Zi Chen said. "I don't feel at ease leaving our lives in the hands of those ghosts." In just 2 days, dozens of people had died. If this happened every day, no matter how fast the 2 of them ran, they would be devoured one day. On the 3rd day, the ghost appeared early in the morning and devoured the souls of 8 people. Qing Yi told them again that it was different from the previous 2 days. This was the 4th ghost. 3 sunrises in a row, the ghost came, so everyone became frightened. When the 4th sunrise, everyone ran out of the cave. The ghost came again. Qing Yi said that this was the 5th ghost. Everyone began to run. Those who were able to survive until now were all strong and healthy. The ghost gradually caught up with the people behind. As Zi Chen said, no matter how fast they ran, once the prey disappeared one by one, everyone would become the ghost's target. Suddenly, Zi Chen's pupils shrank. He saw a young man running at full speed, holding a long stick in his hand, and fiercely hit the person in front of him. With a bang, the person staggered and rolled on the ground. The other party laughed and then jumped over the person who fell on the ground. The ghost behind approached and stopped to devour the soul of the person who fell on the ground. Another bang sounded, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking. A person's leg was broken, and he fell to the ground and wailed. After devouring the first soul, the ghost caught up and devoured the person with the broken leg. "Not bad, you have some wisdom." Zi Chen heard Yu Gui's words. This time, he heard it very clearly. Furthermore, Yu Gui was laughing loudly and his voice was very loud. He immediately looked at Qing Yi and asked in a low voice, "Did you hear what it said?" Qing Yi shook her head, indicating that she didn't hear anything. "As long as you don't kill me, there will be plenty of food." Then Zi Chen heard another voice, but it wasn't the ghost's voice. It was the young man with the stick. Zi Chen's expression changed, but this time he didn't ask Qing Yi, "You can understand me?" The ghost devoured the second soul and looked at the young man. The young man ran, and with the 3rd strike, another person fell to the ground. He ran away again and said, "I can hear a little. As long as you don't kill me, I will help you hunt. How about it?" Zi Chen heard the conversation between the 2 clearly, but the others didn't seem to hear it. Zi Chen was very sure of this, because if they could hear the young man, they would naturally be afraid, or at least look at him a few more times. However, no one reacted, and everyone was running away. How many do you want today? I will help you kill them all. The young man asked. 8. The ghost said. The young man quickly rushed up, and the stick in his hand continuously fell. With a bang, another 5 people fell. With the previous few, there were exactly 8 people. The ghost began to devour. The young man asked again, Are you still coming tomorrow? If you are, I will prepare the prey for you at sunrise tomorrow. Today's meal should be enough to last for 2 days. Guta is too arrogant. We have to teach them a lesson. After devouring enough souls, the ghost turned and left. Let's go. After the ghost left, Zichen pulled Qing Yi deeper. Things were getting more and more urgent. If they couldn't find a way to kill the ghost, then everyone would die here. Chapter 4029. Despicable, truly despicable. He clearly had the ability to escape, so why did he attack the others? At the foot of a mountain, Qing Yi was extremely angry. Her anger came from the young man from before. He could have run away. Why did he interfere with others' lives? In order to confirm his guess, Zichen asked, Did you hear the conversation between him and the ghost? What conversation? Qing Yi asked. Sure enough, she didn't hear it. Zichen told Qing Yi about the conversation between the two. Qing Yi was surprised, then worried, because the young man was obviously in cahoots with the ghost. Based on their conversation, I suspect that the ghost is not united, and they come here to devour life to replenish their energy, just like how we eat. I guess that because there was no battle before, they could go for many days without eating. But with the outbreak of the battle, the consumption increased, so there are different ghosts coming here every day. Zichen said, If the battle continues, then all of us will be devoured. So before that, we have to find a way to kill those ghosts. But what can we do? Qing Yi said helplessly, We are unarmed. We are no match for them at all. Think of a way maybe we can succeed. On this day, Zichen walked between the mountains, looking for terrain that could be used. The sky was getting dark, so the two went back. Back at the original mountain, Zichen suddenly heard Li Haoqing's hysterical voice. Zichen, come and save Grandpa. If you don't come, we will never see each other again. Zichen was shocked and sped up. Although he never regarded Li Haoqing as his grandpa, he still felt that the old man was good to him, so he naturally couldn't let anything happen to the old man. From afar, Zichen saw the young man from the day. He raised the long stick in his hand and seemed to be about to hit Li Haoqing's right leg. Once the stick hit, the old man will definitely die in the second hunt. Stop! Zichen shouted angrily and dashed forward. Stop! The young man put away the long stick and said with a playful smile, What? You want to stop us? Zichen said coldly, What do you think? The young man put down the stick in his hand and said helplessly, Don't look at me like that. This isn't my idea. It's everyone's idea. Everyone's idea. Zichen's gaze scanned the surroundings. Many people lowered their heads, not daring to meet Zichen's gaze. The young man said, Actually, I think this is a good suggestion because these old things have lived for too long. If they don't become food, do you want us to become food? If they don't die, we will be the ones to die. The young man glanced at Zichen, then at Qing Yi, and said, If these old things don't die, then who do you think will? Are you going? Or is the little lady beside you going? Dissatisfied, Qing Yi said, They survived with their own abilities. Why should they die? The old men who had been selected nodded. It was better to live than to die. No one was willing to die. But they're too old. They need to have some dedication. The young man looked at the others and said, Don't you think so? Immediately, some people nodded and some even agreed. He wasn't lying. Many people agreed with his suggestion. Little brat, you actually want your father to die. An old man scolded a middle-aged man angrily. The middle-aged man said, Dad, if you don't die, we will die. I hope you can have some dedication. The old man was so angry that his body trembled. Li Haoqing was obviously very worried about Zichen. At this moment, he looked at Zichen with pleading eyes. Zichen nodded slightly and said, "After hearing what you said, it does make some sense." Zichen heard the sigh of relief on both sides. Li Haoqing and the other old men who had been selected had despair in their eyes. Zichen's expression didn't change. He changed the topic and said, "But if they contribute today, what about tomorrow? Who will contribute tomorrow? What about the day after tomorrow?" The smile on the young man's face froze. "What do you mean?" Zichen said, "It's very simple. For the past few days, there have been ghosts coming every day. We don't know how long this situation will last. Let me ask everyone, even if some people contribute, how long can the others live?" Zichen looked around. "It may only be a few dozen sunrises. When that time comes, everyone will die." Everyone lowered their heads. It wasn't that they didn't think of this problem, but they deliberately avoided it and deliberately didn't think about it. For them, to be able to live until sunrise was naturally a good thing. And even if they died, dying later was better than dying early. Zichen continued, "Maybe you think that this situation is only temporary. Maybe after a few sunrises, everything will return to normal. But even so, those ghosts still need to hunt and eat. How long can we hold on? If there are no old men to contribute, then who are you going to give up and who will contribute? Your wives or your children. But according to your logic, as a father, shouldn't you contribute to your children?" Zichen's eyes suddenly became sharp. "When all these old things in your eyes have contributed, then it will be your turn. Because you will become a father, I don't know if you are willing." Under his aggressive gaze, everyone subconsciously stepped back. They didn't dare to look at Zichen's eyes. The reincarnation of the heavens. Today, they made their parents give up their lives to contribute. Then, as parents, they will have to contribute their lives in the future. Everyone sank into silence. There were also many people who had guilt in their eyes. Li Haoqing shed tears. He felt that his grandson's love was not in vain. Suddenly there was applause. It was from the young man. He threw the stick to the side and looked at Zichen. "Since you said it so righteously, then please tell us, how are we going to survive? Are we going to run every day until the last person dies?" Qing Yi wanted to say something, but she was stopped by Zichen. Zichen signaled Qing Yi to stop talking with his eyes. He continued, "If this goes on, everyone will die, so to avoid this situation, we have to resist." "How?" The young man sneered. "Are you going to talk about human rights with those animals? Are you going to tell them that what you are doing is wrong?" Zichen said in a deep voice, "Resist and kill the ghosts." There was an uproar. Even the young man was shocked. His body trembled. "What did you say?" "Kill the ghosts. Only then can we eliminate all future troubles." Zichen emphasized, "Only by killing them can we survive." Zichen's words shocked everyone, because since birth, no one had ever thought of killing the ghosts. Everyone was thinking of ways to escape, and even practiced a lot of digging skills. But when it came to killing the ghosts, no one had ever thought of it. "Are you crazy?" The young man looked at Zichen. Zichen's words were indeed beyond common sense. "The ghosts are also flesh and blood. Why can't we kill them? As long as we find the right geographical location, we can kill them." Zichen said calmly and confidently. "What do you have in mind?" The young man asked. "Find the right geographical location. Then we can cooperate." Zichen said, "During this time, everyone has to listen to my command." The young man narrowed his eyes. "You want to command me?" "If you have a way, then you can command me too." Zichen looked into the young man's eyes and said, "I'm at your command." The two of them looked at each other like that, neither of them backing down. The atmosphere around them became tense. "Well, I'll listen to you this time." In the end, the young man smiled and said, "My name is Yi Bufan." Zichen. Chin stretched out his hand, and the two of them shook hands. Everyone dispersed. Those old people who survived the disaster looked at Chin with gratitude. Back in the cave, Qing nervously asked, "Are you sure you can cooperate with him?" Chen said, "If I don't cooperate with him, the others will die. Let's take one step at a time." "Didn't you say that he joined the ghost? What if he's a secret?" "He shouldn't be, because cooperating with us is very risky. It's better than cooperating with the ghost that can devour people at any time." "Do you really have a way to kill the ghost?" "There's no 100% way, but I have to give it a try." On a new day, the ghost came again. Because it wasn't the ghost from yesterday, Ibu Fan didn't deliberately break the legs of the others. Everyone relied on their own ability to escape. Qing Yi said that this ghost came here once before, and it was the ghost that left on the first day. Zichan guessed that there were 5 ghosts in this area. After the ghost ate its fill and left, Zichan led the others to go deeper and finally arrived at a steep mountain. He pointed at the mountain and said, "Think of a way to loosen the big rocks on the mountain, then lure the ghost here and use the rocks on the mountain to completely defeat the ghost." The young man looked at the rugged rocks and frowned. "What if we fail?" "If we fail, naturally someone will die." Chin said, "But we can still take a gamble. If we don't try, in the end, everyone will die." Chin especially emphasized the word everyone. "Okay, then let's try." Ibu Fan threw away the long stick and decided to try. Chin began to instruct everyone to work. Everyone started to move, and Chin constantly checked the degree of loosening of the rocks. During this time, some people would occasionally miss, and the big rocks would rumble and roll down, creating a huge noise. Everyone's face was very pale, because if they were hit by a big rock, it was almost impossible to survive. But this also gave them some confidence that maybe this time they could really succeed. On the morning of the second day of work, no underworld ghost showed up. Everyone let out a sigh of relief and continued with their work. There was also no ghost on the third day. After 3 days of work, everyone prepared a lot of traps, but whether these traps would work or not, Chen still needed to carefully check. On the 4th day, the underworld ghost came, and another chase began. Some people were swallowed, and some people ran away. "Don't kill me, don't kill me." Chapter 40:30. Don't kill me. The trap they prepared hasn't succeeded yet. I can take you to destroy it. Once the trap is successfully set, you will die. The unfortunate man who was targeted shouted in horror. His voice was very loud, and he sounded like he was about to cry. Everyone heard his shout, and for a moment, everyone's face changed. Some people's body went soft, and they almost collapsed. If the other party brought Yugue over and learned that everyone was plotting against him, then everyone would be finished. Qing Yi looked at Chin nervously. She didn't expect this to happen. If the other party really brought Yugue over, then the first one to die would be Chin. She grabbed Chen's arm. Chen gently grabbed Qing Yi's arm, indicating that she didn't need to worry. Yugue swooped down, facing the man who was shouting, and took a deep breath. The next moment, the man's soul left his body. Just like that, he died. Just as Yugue was enjoying himself, everyone continued to run. But this time, everyone was a bit more relaxed. Chen's forehead was already covered with sweat. He looked relaxed before, but in fact, he was under a lot of pressure. It seems that he made the right bet. Yugue couldn't understand them at all. They were not on the same language level at all. Perhaps in the underworld ghost's eyes, the human who had been trying to intimidate it was just shouting and provoking its dignity. It was like an ant waving its tentacles at a child. The child naturally didn't understand what the ant was trying to say, and might even mistakenly think that it was provoking him. The next thing he did was to kick him. After swallowing the man's soul, Yugue continued to hunt. No one knew if there was a lesson learned from the previous incident, but this time no one was swallowed by Yugue. After the hunt was over, all the survivors gathered together. Ibufan came with his long stick. He first looked at Zichin and asked, "How is the situation?" "I still need to check it carefully. It should be done in a day," Zichin said. Ibufan placed the long rod in his hand and hit it. He said coldly, "If we fail this time, the first one to die will be you." Perhaps Ibufan didn't understand what he was saying, but Zichin knew that if he failed, Ibufan would use his advantage of being able to communicate with Yu Gui to betray Zichin. In other words, he was encouraging the other party to be the first to kill Zichin. Zichin said in a deep voice, "Regardless of success or failure, we still have to try." Ibufan snorted and then looked at the others. Ibufan wouldn't be polite to these people. "I don't want to see what happened today a second time. Next time, if there's anyone who wants to betray everyone to fight for a chance to live, then I'm sorry. Whether you can survive or not, I'll break your wives' and children's legs and throw them out." The others kept quiet out of fear, not even daring to breathe loudly. Zichin didn't say anything. Sometimes these people needed to be taught a lesson. He had overlooked it before, but fortunately it didn't lead to a big mistake. The next day, Zichin checked the traps for the whole day. After a careful inspection, Zichin estimated that it was about time. That night, Zichin called everyone together. For the first time, he stood at a commanding position as the leader and ordered, "If there's only one Yu Gui tomorrow, then we'll act according to the plan." Everyone's eyes were filled with expectation. If Zichin really killed Yu Gui tomorrow, then everyone would have hope. At this time, Zichin changed the topic, but if there are 2 Yu Gui tomorrow, then everyone will immediately leave this mountain. Even if you die, you can't come back here, let alone ruin our plan. Everyone's expression became dignified again. This is what you need to pay attention to. There must be no problems, otherwise our efforts will be in vain. Zichin warned again. Everyone's expression changed. Ibufan stood up and said, "The reason is very simple. If there's only one beast tomorrow, then we'll work together to kill it. If there are 2, then you can escape as usual. Except for this mountain with traps, you can escape to other places. If you don't die, then we'll meet here." Although the words were not very pleasant to hear, the meaning was expressed accurately and on point. Coupled with the bad impression Ibufan left on everyone, everyone nodded and prayed that there would only be one Yu Gui tomorrow. That night, everyone left the cave for the first time, abandoning their many years of habits. They didn't sleep well that night. Sometimes they would be awakened by the wind and grass rustling in the wind. That night, everyone was nervous and expectant. Just as the first ray of sunlight illuminated the earth, they saw the sunrise on the mountain peak. They didn't know if it was an illusion, but today's sunrise seemed to be particularly beautiful. Zichin's gaze was looking into the distance. His mood was not calm, because no one was sure which direction the Yu Gui would come from. At this moment, Zichin also began to pray in his heart. Because there were too many uncertainties, they needed some luck. If they didn't succeed this time, then everyone would lose their confidence and no longer have the heart to resist. A last-minute prayer might be useful. There's one ahead. Zichin also began to pray, although he never believed that prayer was useful before. But there was always a limit to one's strength. Everything depended on fate. In their field of vision, there was movement. A Yu Gui appeared on the mountain peak in front of them. Everyone's hearts were hanging in the air, and their memories were already in their throats. Everyone held their breaths. They hoped that there was only one Yu Gui. The Yu Gui stood on the mountain peak and began to look around, as if it was looking for a target. Perhaps after hunting here for many years, it was the first time that it didn't see humans in captivity. It was somewhat unaccustomed to it. The Yu Gui that was looking around seemed to have used some unknown method to quickly lock on to their direction. It jumped down from the mountain peak and ran towards them. No one let down their guard because they were worried that a second Yu Gui would appear. Zichen's eyes were fixed on the mountain peak in front of them, while Qingyi and Yibufan looked to the left and right. It seemed that luck was on their side this time. A second Yugui didn't appear. Yibufan lowered his voice and said, "There should be only one. Looks like our luck is good." Zichen retracted his gaze and looked at the Yugui that had already run down from the mountain peak. He said in a deep voice, "Next, we need someone to act as bait." "What did you say?" Yibufan turned his head and looked at Zichen. Zichen's eyes were still fixed on the front. "We need a bait to lead this Yugui to the designated direction." Yibufan's eyes became cold. "Then what are you waiting for? There are so many people here. Just throw one of them out." Zichen said, "What we need is bait, not cannon fodder. Only a strong bait will do. I can see that your body is strong. Why don't you go?" Yibufan sneered. Zichen looked at him and said indifferently, "I can go, but I'm not sure if you can accurately trigger these traps." Yibufan clenched the long rod in his hand. "So you've been scheming against me from the beginning?" Zichen said calmly, "This is not scheming. I think you have the ability to do so. During this time, you have already memorized the directions of all the traps. With your strong body, I believe you will succeed." The Yugui was getting closer and closer. Many people's eyes were on Zichen, and they gradually became more and more anxious. Yibufan stood up. "If you don't die this time, I will kill you myself." Clearly, he was truly enraged. He had been tricked by this seemingly harmless fellow. Zichen said, "I think it's better for you to pick up some stones. If you can anger it, the chances of success will be higher. You win." Yibufan glared at Zichen fiercely. He picked up a few stones and rushed down. Zichen also took the opportunity to pick up a few stones in case he needed them. After Yibufan left, Zichen said in a deep voice, "Everyone listen to my orders." Everyone held their breaths as they stared intently at the scene below. Yibufan rushed downwards. When he was still some distance away from the dark ghost, he threw a stone at the dark ghost. It was a provocation. As expected, the Yugui was enraged. It roared and rushed toward Yibufan. Yibufan was about to leave when a rumbling sound came from above. He saw a big stone falling down. Looking at the momentum of the falling stone, it was not aimed at the Yugui. It was obviously aimed at Yibufan. Yibufan cursed, but he stopped abruptly and stood there motionless. At this moment, he had a big stone behind him and a Yugui in front of him. He was in a dilemma. The Yugui came close and roared. It opened its mouth and was about to devour Yibufan's soul. At this moment, Yibufan tapped his foot and quickly rushed to the side. His speed was affected by the devouring power. His movement was very slow, but he still managed to avoid the rolling stone. Boom! The big stone hit the Yugui's body and directly knocked it down the mountain. The devouring power that fell on Yibufan's body immediately dissipated. His movement returned to normal. He raised his head and gave the sky a disdainful middle finger. Zichen, on the other hand, gave him a thumbs up from above. Everyone else relaxed a little. Yugui had actually been hit. Yibufan looked down and saw that the big stone had fallen. The Yugui was not dead. It turned over and roared and rushed up. During this period, only Yibufan and Zichen could understand the sounds of cursing. Zichen looked at Yibufan's position below. After thinking for a while, he went to the second direction and triggered the trap. It could be said that the speed at which Zichen triggered the trap was faster than the speed at which Yibufan lured the Yugui. When Yibufan heard the commotion, he raised his head and cursed, because Zichen's action had put him in a very passive position. At this moment, it was not him who lured the Yugui to trigger the trap. After Zichen triggered the trap, he had to risk his life and lead the Yugui to crash into it. If he did not control his speed well, he would lose his life. At this moment, he had cursed all 18 generations of Zichen's ancestors, but he did not dare to leave without permission. The timing was perfect. The big stone fell, and Bufon disappeared. Boom! Boom! Chapter 4031. Chen stood above and watched the second attack hit the target. He nodded with satisfaction. At the same time, he admired Bufon's judgment and reaction speed. After being hit for the second time, Yugui still didn't die, but his body was covered in blood and there was a hole in his head. He looked very miserable. No one cheered because everyone could feel the wrath of the underworld ghost. Everyone was under great pressure. Suddenly, someone accidentally triggered a mechanism and a big stone rolled down from the sky. Chen's face changed and immediately said, "Everyone back off!" He overestimated these people's ability to withstand pressure. They had experienced countless death threats and brushed shoulders with death countless times. Now that they were facing their biggest enemy, they were actually nervous. The sudden fall of a huge rock was like a wake-up call to the ghost world. Chen knew very well that Yugui was intelligent. Bufon raised his head to look at the sky and cursed again. It was impossible for him to bring Yugui over now. The vigilant Yugui might take a detour. Bufon's face became gloomy. Chen threw down a pebble from above. This pebble landed beside Bufon's feet, splashing up some dust. This was Chen's warning, but it was also Chen's warning. He looked back at Chen. At this time, Chen was also looking at Bufon. Chen's expression was rarely cold. It could even be said that he was ruthless. Bufon gritted his teeth, then lowered his head to look at Yugui and cursed. It was the kind of cursing that Yugui could understand. "Beast, what are you doing there? You look like an old bull. Did you just come back from plowing the field, so you're panting? Idiot, you want to devour us. You're so miserable. Why don't you die? Why didn't I kill you earlier? Why didn't I kill you? How dare you devour us? You have big dog guts." Bufon started cursing in a language that Underworld Ghost could understand. It seemed that he wanted to scold Underworld Ghost into a daze. Being scolded by its food all this, while the Underworld Ghost had never suffered such humiliation before. Therefore, the reason it had just regained was now gone. Burning with rage, it roared and rushed forward. Bufon began to flee. Chen stood on the mountain peak and followed Bufon's movements. At this moment, the others had already retreated far away. Because they had accidentally triggered the trap earlier, it had already brought them a great deal of trouble. All of a sudden, Chen paused and triggered a mechanism. The boulder rolled down, kicking up a cloud of dust along the way. Bufon dodged to the side. Yugui looked at the falling boulder and punched out. With a pung sound, the large rock was blasted away and its body slid down several feet. Damn it! How can he be so strong? Isn't he already in a weakened state? Seeing the state of the underworld ghost, Bufon cursed again. He could only lead the underworld ghost to the second trap. However, this time, Chen did not trigger the trap. In desperation, he could only lure the underworld ghost to the next trap. Chen still did not trigger the trap. Bufon cursed angrily. "Chen, you ** king dog. How dare you frame me?" The third trap was finally triggered, but for the underworld ghost it was nothing. It punched the boulder away and slid back again. But this time, just as it stabilized its body, the second trap that had not been triggered fell. The underworld ghost roared angrily and punched the boulder away again. Its body involuntarily retreated, and then the first trap that had not been triggered fell. This time, the underworld ghost could not avoid it. It was directly hit in the head, and its body rolled down again. Bufon stopped not far away. Looking at the beautiful 3-hit combo from before, he couldn't help but sigh at the ingenuity of Chen's calculation. Obviously, even he did not think of this method. However, he obviously would not stop cursing Chen. That dog was scheming against him from the beginning, so he had no problem cursing him to vent his anger. However, with that Three-hit combo. His trust in Zichen had increased by a notch. Hence, he put in even more effort in running after that. Zichen ran on top of the mountain, triggering one trap after another. At the same time, Zichen shouted to the others, "Everyone, get ready to pick up the boulder. Once the underworld ghost rushes up, throw it with all your strength." The underworld ghost suffered too many attacks. Its body was dripping with blood, but its tenacity greatly exceeded Zichen's expectations. Finally, all the traps were triggered, and the hit rate was more than 90%. Ibufan rushed to the top of the mountain and asked, "This guy is not dead yet. What do we do now?" Zichen's face was a bit ugly. It was obviously a strong body. How could it be so tenacious? "Retreat first," Zichen shouted. "Let's get out of here first." After hearing Zichen's words, the people who were already terrified ran to the other side. At this moment, many people's eyes were filled with resentment because Zichen made such a stupid move, now that he had angered the underworld ghost. All of them had to die. Ibufan took his long staff and ran away. At this moment, among all the people present, he was the most nervous, because he had completely angered the underworld ghost. The first person it wanted to kill was him. Zichen and Qing Yi also ran away. At this moment, Zichen had not thought of a good way to deal with the enemy. The tenacity of the underworld ghost was beyond his expectations. When Zichen jumped down from the mountain, the underworld ghost had already arrived at the top of the mountain. Looking at the people below, its body was covered in blood, and its eyes were filled with cruelty. It was searching for a target. Sure enough, in the next moment, its eyes fell on Ibufan. The humiliation from before was still vivid in its mind, and it wanted to kill this person. When Ibufan was stared at by the underworld ghost, his body tensed up. He could feel it, and his eyes were filled with fear. The underworld ghost's target was Ibufan. The underworld ghost's eyes began to change, and after a moment of hesitation, he shouted, "Everyone, protect Zichen first!" No one responded, or rather, everyone was running away, and no one cared about Zichen. Ibufan shouted again, "Zichen is our leader, and also the mastermind of this incident. Protect the leader first. There will be opportunities to set a trap next time." Of course, no one would protect Zichen. At this moment, only their own lives were the most important. But subconsciously, those people glanced at Zichen. At this moment, the underworld ghost that was charging towards Zichen suddenly looked at him coldly. Chapter 4032. Ibufan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Yu Gue turn around and chase after Zichen. Regardless of whether or not he could survive, at least his life was saved. Damn it, I shouldn't have listened to him. Maybe I could have reached an agreement with these bastards. Ibufan cursed under his breath and immediately ran away. At this moment, he was still worried that Zichen might drag him down with him before he died. Therefore, he had to leave as soon as possible and get away from Zichen. No one knew why Yu Gue changed its direction to chase after Zichen. Didn't they say that Yu Gue couldn't understand them? Zichen was the only one who knew the reason. Therefore, when he heard Ibufan's words, before Yu Gue could react, he pushed Qing Yi to the side and shouted, "Split up and run!" Zichen ran away alone. Ibufan's second words rang out, this time in a language that everyone could understand. Qing Yi was staring blankly at Zichen at this moment, so Yu Gue didn't notice anything unusual. Zichen ran away, running into the distance. Yu Gue chased after him. It could have easily devoured others along the way, but it actually ran past them. It was obvious that it wanted to kill Zichen. The Yu Gue behind it was aggressive, but Zichen kept running and jumping, his figure vigorous. Perhaps because of the excessive bleeding, Yu Gue's speed couldn't completely suppress Zichen, so it couldn't catch Zichen in time. Zichen didn't lose his mind while running. He was calm and collected. A mountain peak appeared in front of him. He flew up, leaving behind a cloud of dust. His vigorous figure was not inferior to Ibufan at all. At this moment, only Zichen was running towards the depths of the mountain, while the others ran in opposite directions. Zichen didn't deliberately lead Yugui to anyone, so he faced Yugui alone. Ibufan, who had already run in another direction, had a change in his expression. To be honest, after he had betrayed Zichen, he had thought that Zichen might bring Hell Ghost over. If it were him, he would have done the same. But Zichen didn't, which surprised him. At this moment, he saw Zichen suddenly slow down. His expression changed slightly. Is he running out of energy? Wraith obviously noticed this as well. It sped up again and closed the distance between it and Zichen. Qing Yi stood there and didn't run. Earlier, when the underworld ghost ran past her, it didn't devour her. Her eyes were filled with despair because her plan had failed. The possibility of Zichen surviving was almost zero. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Rumble! A thunderous sound suddenly rang out, and countless clouds of dust flew up like a dust dragon. It was a huge boulder, more than 100 feet long. It rolled down from the top of the mountain and smashed toward Zichen. Zichen looked up. His eyes were still calm. At the moment when the boulder was about to drown him, he directly dodged. The huge boulder smashed towards Yugui, directly crushing its body and bringing it down the mountain. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. How could there be such a coincidence? In the distance, Ibufan narrowed his eyes. This was obviously not a coincidence. It was prepared in advance. In other words, Zichen had already guessed that the trap would fail, and at the same time he also guessed that he would betray him at the first moment. So he prepared a backup plan. After being hit by the rolling boulder, Yugui began to shake its head, and it seemed to be in a bad state. Zichen stood on top of the mountain, looking at Yugui indifferently. When the two sides looked at each other, Zichen saw the brutality in Yugui's eyes. He was not afraid at all. He stretched out his hand and hooked it. A mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. This was a provocation. Die. Yugui was enraged. It roared and rushed up, but this time it did not go straight up. Instead, it moved left and right. Obviously, it had learned its lesson. Of course, in Zichen's eyes, this was also a kind of fear. He turned around and left. Yugui accelerated in a straight line. Zichen's figure that had just disappeared reappeared. Yugui immediately stopped and quickly dodged, worried that it was a trap. Zichen smiled sarcastically, then turned around and left. Yugui was vigilant and continued to move left and right. When it reached the top of the mountain, it saw that Zichen had already left. It roared again and chased after him like a wisp of smoke. Then Yugui was hit by 2 boulders in succession, and its injuries became more and more serious. This was Zichen's preparation in advance. It was not easy to find such natural places that could be used, and at the same time it was also for emergencies. Following this, Zichen did not have any backup plans. He began to run madly as Yugui continued to chase after him. The distance between the two was getting closer and closer. Zichen's calm expression gradually became anxious, because everything did not develop as he expected. All the traps were gone. What should he do now? Delay until the other party dies from excessive blood loss? Fortunately, the only thing that made Zichen feel fortunate was that Yugui did not devour others to replenish its energy. The distance between the two sides was gradually closing. Just as Zichen was about to rush into a dense forest, Yugui caught up. It rushed at Zichen. Sensing the abnormality behind him, Zichen rolled on the ground and left. Yugui landed on the ground and opened its mouth to suck Zichen, and a devouring force fell on Zichen's body. Zichen quickly retreated, avoiding the devouring soul in time. Yugui rushed again, this time directly pouncing on Zichen. It did not immediately devour Zichen, but instead used its hands to strangle Zichen's neck. Its eyes were extremely cold, and it wanted to strangle Zichen to death. At this moment, devouring was no longer important. It was pouring out its anger. Zi-Chen's neck was strangled, and he could not breathe. His cheeks were red, and his vitality was also slowly draining away. Suddenly, a person appeared in front of him. It was Qing Yi. She was holding a large rock in both hands and smashing it fiercely at the back of Yu Gui's head. With a bang, Yu Gui's body shook, and the hand that was strangling Zi-Chen loosened a little. Zi-Chen began to gasp for breath. At this moment, Yu Gui exerted its strength again, completely ignoring Qing Yi behind it. Qing Yi kept smashing the rock. Her eyes were full of anxiety, but it did not cause any damage to Yu Gui. Seeing that Zi-Chen was about to die, a person suddenly appeared in front of Yu Gui, and then the shadow of a staff appeared and hit the back of Yu Gui's head. Yu Gui shook its head and turned to look behind, but its hands were still exerting force. It saw Yi Bufan, the ant that dared to speak the language of its race. Yi Bufan shouted, and the staff in his hand was raised again and it whistled down. Bang! Yu Gui's body shook again, but it exerted more force, obviously wanting to kill Zi-Chen first. Zi-Chen's eyes gradually turned white, and the light in his pupils was fading. With their weak strength, they could not affect Yu Gui at all, even if it was heavily injured. Chapter 4033. Yi Bufan gritted his teeth and swung his staff with all his might. He didn't know why he ran over to save Zi-Chen. Maybe he saw some hope. But the tenacity of Yu Gui's vitality was beyond his expectations once again. Yu Gui's injuries were already so serious, but after several strikes he was still so energetic. It seemed that it was impossible to save Zi-Chen now, and the thought of retreating emerged in his heart. But Qing Yi was still holding on. Suddenly, a light appeared in front of Yi Bufan. It was very sudden. He was shocked and subconsciously stepped back, staring at the front with the staff in his hand. At first he thought it was a ghost, but when he saw the black light, his expression changed. It was an unknown little beast. It was standing beside Zi-Chen on the ground, and its eyes were staring at Zi-Chen. Zi-Chen was gasping for breath, looking like he had just survived a disaster. What happened to Yu Gui? Just as Yi Bufan was thinking, Qing Yi smashed another stone. Yu Gui's body suddenly tilted to the side and fell there motionless. Blood flowed down its neck, as if it was pierced by some kind of sharp weapon. It's dead. Yu Gui is dead. Yi Bufan's face was filled with surprise and disbelief. Qing Yi threw away the bloody stone, stepped forward and asked with concern, Zi-Chen, how are you? Zi-Chen took a few deep breaths, shook his head and said, I'm fine, I'm still alive. His face was filled with joy. This time he had really managed to escape with his life. Next to him stood a little black beast. It was not big and looked very cute. At first glance, Zi-Chen felt a sense of familiarity. At the same time, he also felt a sense of closeness. The little beast was also curiously looking at Zi-Chen. Its eyes were very lively. Thank you for saving me. Zi-Chen thanked the little beast. The little beast jumped onto Zi-Chen's shoulder, then jumped onto Zi-Chen's head. Zi-Chen smiled and subconsciously reached out his hand, and the little beast jumped onto his palm. Zi-Chen carefully looked at the little beast. I seem to have seen you before? In a dream? Now is not the time to dream. You should think of a way to deal with this beast's body. Yi Bufan's voice sounded. Zi-Chen glanced at the dead Yu Gui. At this time, he still had a lingering fear. Without a suitable weapon, it's too difficult to kill a Yu Gui. Suddenly, Zi-Chen's eyes lit up, decompose it. Yi Bufan's eyes widened, looking at Zi-Chen strangely. You're not going to eat, are you? We need some sharp weapons. Its bones should be the most suitable. Hearing Zi-Chen's words, Yi Bufan glanced at the long rod in his hand. He carefully searched for it. The material was excellent, but after the battle, there were many cracks on it, and it can only be used a few times. Okay. Yi Bufan also understood the importance of a sharp weapon. so he nodded without hesitation. The others noticed the strange situation here and ran over. After seeing the Yugue's body, they were all shocked and in disbelief. But soon they cheered. Among the cheers, there was also absolute confidence. There's no time to celebrate, everyone. Now we have to hurry and find the second trap. Zichen said in a deep voice. Once the Yugue finds out that one of them is missing, they may come to us soon. What do you need us to do next? Zichen. Just tell us. One of the strong men said. Yes, what do you need us to do? Zichen. Just tell us. The others also nodded. After this incident, everyone had absolute trust in Zichen. Tell me, what do you want me to do? Bufan threw away the long rod in his hand and looked at the Yugue's body. I need a good weapon now. We'll talk about the weapon later. Now, you and I will each lead a team to find a suitable place to set the trap. Once we find it, send someone to inform us. Zichen looked back at Qing-Yi and said, Qing-Yi, bring a few people to dissect the Yugue's body and leave all the bones. We need to polish the weapon. Qing-Yi nodded and quickly called a few people, and they were all old people, including Li Haoqing. The survivors were divided into 3 groups and began to do their job. Qing-Yi found some sharp stones and then began to dissect the Yugue's body. As the sky darkened, Zichen and Bufan returned with their men. There were many mountains here, and they had made new discoveries today. Zichen felt familiar with the unknown small beast, but it did not enter the forest and followed Zichen all the way. The small beast's body was not big, but it had a pair of sharp claws. The reason why the Yugue's throat was pierced by the sharp claws. Qing-Yi had already dug out all the bones of the Yugue's body and placed them together for Zichen and the others to choose from. As the leader in everyone's heart, Zichen was not modest this time. He picked a bone that looked like a big knife. Next was Bufan. He picked a large piece of beast bone that could be used as a heavy hammer. He waved it a few times, and with a whistling sound, he nodded with satisfaction. Holding the beast bone knife, Zichen walked to the side and began to sharpen it on a big stone. This natural beast bone still needs to be carefully polished to become sharper. As for the other beast bones, they were divided among everyone. Everyone followed Zichen's example and began to sharpen it. After a whole night, the bone knife was sharpened into a prototype. Zichen put away the knife and stood, looking into the distance. That was the place where the Yugue often came. He wondered if the Yugue would appear today. Leave a few people to stay here and report. The rest of you, follow me to set the trap. With yesterday's success, everyone was full of confidence in Zichen. No one had any objections and began to work according to Zichen's instructions. The Yugue's side did not seem to notice that they had lost one of their own. They did not appear for 2 days. Zichen set the trap during the day and sharpened the knife at night. The beast bone knife gradually became sharper. On the 4th day, the trap had begun to take shape. They could fight again, and this time, everyone had beast bone weapons in their hands, so they were more confident. On this day, the Yugue went deeper and deeper. When it was about to reach the end, it found its food. The food had left its original place. It was very angry and directly rushed forward. Zichen glanced at Bufan. There was no need for him to say anything. Bufan jumped down from the mountain peak. Chapter 4034. The boulder rumbled, bringing with it a cloud of dust. The ghost that had just rushed up was smashed down for the 3rd time. Bufan came to the top of the mountain. At this time, there was no one on the mountain. There were only 3 traps on the mountain. With the cooperation of Zichen, all of them were hit. The ghost roared and chased after him. Bufan fled down the mountain. At this time, Zichen had already brought people to the 2nd mountain. He was going to use the same method as before. The ghost was intelligent, but once angered it would lose its mind. At the edge of the 2nd mountain was a steep cliff. After several traps were activated, Everyone left from the sides. Chen was hiding in the dark. He was the only one who stayed. The angry ghost often did not care about the things around it. It only had eyes for its target. Bufon came forward with a seriously injured ghost. When he was about to reach the edge of the cliff, he jumped without hesitation. The ghost was only 10 feet away from him. When it saw his suicidal action, it immediately stopped, but its body still moved forward. When it was less than a meter away from the cliff, it stopped. Below them was a cliff. Even if it fell down, it would most likely die without a doubt. But before it could cry out, there was a sudden movement behind it. Yugue turned around abruptly and saw a person leaping up and kicking at it with both feet. At this critical moment, it could only raise its arms to block. Pum! The strong force made Chen fall back to the top of the mountain, but the ghost fell to the cliff behind. At the bottom of the cliff, there were piles of rocks of different sizes. There was no soft ground. The ghost's body hit a big rock. Its back fell first, and with a crack, its waist was broken. Qingyi, who had been waiting for a long time, brought people with her with beast bone weapons. While the ghost was unable to move, she stabbed at its vital points. Chen's little beast hid at the side, ready to attack at any time. Unsurprisingly, the ghost died under the attack of the soldiers. There was no breath left. On the mountain, Chen heard the cheers from below and breathed a sigh of relief. The second ghost was dead. How is it? He lowered his head and looked down. Bufon grabbed a vine that he had prepared long ago and climbed up. I won't die. Standing up, he looked down and asked, How many are left? Chen said, If nothing unexpected happens, there should be 3 more. Bufon's expression turned solemn. In other words, the 3 of them might have come together. Chen nodded and did not deny it. If the death of the first shadow ghost did not attract their attention, then the disappearance of 2 shadow ghosts in a row was enough to attract their attention. The next time they appeared, it was very likely that all 3 of them would appear together. The 2 of them walked down from the mountain peak. Everyone had already begun to dissect the beast bones. Now, everyone knew the uses of the weapons. With the help of these bone weapons, the ghost had already been pierced beyond recognition. When Qingyi saw Chen, she smiled and asked, Where should we place the next trap? The others also looked at Chen, their eyes filled with anticipation. Chen had not decided yet, because the next preparation was no longer to deal with 1 shadow ghost, but 3. And unlike the previous 2 times, the shadow ghosts this time might be at their peak and not at their peak. No matter what, they had to think of a way. 2 days later, before Chen was fully prepared, the shadow ghosts came, and 3 of them at once. One of them was the one who had communicated with Bufon. It shouted, Bastard, come out! Chen and Bufon looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. Chen clenched the bone knife in his hand and said in a deep voice, We have to separate them so that we can defeat them one by one. How do we do that? Bufon's face was a little ugly. The 3 of us will take 1 each. I will be responsible for stalling for time. The 2 of you must finish it quickly. Chen said in a deep voice, The little black beast will follow Qingyi and help kill the enemies at the critical moment. After Chen whispered the order, the little black beast jumped onto Qingyi's shoulder. Bufon looked at Chen with a surprised expression. Usually, he was the one who attracted the shadow ghosts to stall for time. He did not expect that Chen would take the initiative to do it this time. Let's do our best. Chen did not explain. Instead, he stood up and ran to the side. He was the only one left. This was no doubt very dangerous, but it was also a choice because Chen did not trust Bufon. Although Bufon worked hard to kill the enemies, he would always choose to betray them at the critical moment. What if Bufon couldn't withstand the pressure and brought Yugue over when he and Qingyi were at a critical juncture? Everything would be over. After Chen appeared, he threw a stone at the shadow ghosts to provoke them. This angered one of the shadow ghosts and it chased after Zichin. After the shadow ghosts left, Ibufan stood up and sneered, "Why are you looking for me?" Without waiting for the shadow ghosts to respond, he turned and ran in another direction. "That's him, I'll go catch him." The underworld ghost that had interacted with Ibufan attacked Ibufan. The last one naturally chased after Qing Yi, who deliberately showed herself. Zichen, who was running, felt the movement behind him and his face gradually became ugly. Everything was as he expected. The 3 shadow ghosts that came here were at their peak and their speed was much faster than before. The distance between the 2 of them was being pulled closer and closer. Originally, Zichan wanted to take them to the top of the mountain and see if he could use the power of the stone to slow them down. As for killing them, Zichen did not think about it. At least, he did not think about it for the time being. However, after feeling the speed of the shadow ghosts, Zichen gave up on this idea and directly entered the jungle. The shadow ghosts were tall, and they were not familiar with the jungle. Zichen, who was strong and agile, might have a chance to survive if he entered the jungle. He changed his direction and rushed into the jungle. The shadow ghosts followed, easily passing through the thorns along the way. As for the big trees, they were smashed with a punch. The shadow ghosts that did not consume any energy were surprisingly strong. This made Zichen feel great pressure. After entering the jungle, Zichen found that the distance between them did not increase. Instead, it was closing. I wonder how the situation is over there. Chapter 4035. Just as Zichen stopped, Yugue rushed forward and threw a punch at Zichen's face. Yugue was so fast that Zichen couldn't see his movements clearly. Almost instinctively, he dodged to the side and slashed forward with his machete. Chi! Zichen and Yugue passed each other in an instant. Yugue's skin was cut open. Zichen turned around and stabbed the machete at Yugue's back. Yugue turned around and grabbed Zichen's arm to block the machete. Yugue was much faster than Zichen and stronger than Zichen. With his right arm caught, the machete couldn't move forward. Zichen's expression didn't change as he immediately let go of the machete. His left hand moved forward like lightning, holding the machete and slashing down again. Surprise flashed in Yugue's eyes. He reached out again and grabbed Zichen's left arm. Holding Zichen firmly, he opened his mouth and was about to devour Zichen. At this moment, Zichen exerted strength in his feet and spun his body, kicking Yugue's chin. With a bang, Yugue's body was pushed back and Zichen was freed. This scene happened in an instant, but Zichen's reaction wasn't slow at all. In fact, all of this originated from the battle memories of his body. After escaping, Zichen didn't run away, but continued to attack with his machete. After several encounters with Yugue, he found that if Yugue wanted to devour his soul, he had to do a devouring action. He just had to interrupt it midway. Just as Zichen and Yugue were fighting, Ibufan and Qing Yi each led a Yugue away. The various traps they set up before were triggered one by one. The 2 Yugue roared in anger. "Bastard! You ants! How dare you scheme against us?" Yugue cursed from behind, while Ibufan ran in front, occasionally turning back to curse and provoke the other party. The distance between the 2 was getting closer and closer. A cruel glint flashed in Yugue's eyes. Suddenly, Ibufan changed direction. Yugue couldn't stabilize his body in time and moved forward. It missed a step and fell into a trap. In the next moment, the rolling stone fell and accurately smashed into the trap. Everyone could faintly hear a scream. Following that, even more boulders fell, instantly filling up the large hole that everyone had painstakingly dug. In the large pit, there were many sharpened beast bones and thin tree trunks. This was one of the traps. Ibufan gasped for breath. Luring the underworld ghost to this place required not only physical strength, but also precise calculations. His energy consumption was not small. He glanced into the distance. At this point, everyone was bound together in life and death. As long as the underworld ghost was alive, everyone had to die. Hence, he couldn't be selfish even if he wanted to. Leave a few people here to keep watch. The rest of you follow me. Ibufan shouted, then turned around and left. He was heading towards Qing Yi's direction. Everyone would first work together to kill the dark ghost here, then help Ziqin. At this moment, Qing Yi was also scheming against Yugui. The little black beast that was on her shoulder earlier hid in her bosom. One trap after another was triggered, injuring the underworld ghost. In fact, these injuries were nothing to the underworld ghost. Ziqin's purpose of setting these traps was to provoke it. The real killing move was always at the end. Qing Yi leaped up. Her body was temporarily suspended in the air. When she landed, she stepped on a stone the size of a human head and used it as a stepping stone again. The underworld ghost behind her was rampaging. Just as it reached the large stone, the ground caved in with a loud bang. The underworld ghost's figure fell into the pit. The people hiding in the surroundings appeared one after another with bone weapons and threw them into the deep pit. Some of them even raised stones to smash it. Qing Yi's figure stopped. She turned around and looked at the deep pit. The little black beast jumped onto her shoulder and stared straight ahead. In the deep pit, the underworld ghost's crazy roar could be heard. Then, all the bone weapons and stones flew out of the pit. At the same time, the ground shook. The underworld ghost rushed out of the pit. Its eyes were red, looking exceptionally crazy. At this moment, the little black beast that had been motionless all this time suddenly moved forward like a bolt of black lightning. It came into contact with the underworld ghost in an instant. Their figures crossed each other. After landing, the little black beast's body was covered with several bloody wounds. The wounds were so deep that the bones could be seen. The underworld ghost landed not far away. It covered its neck with both hands and made a groaning sound. Blood kept flowing out from the gaps between its fingers. In the blink of an eye, it was dead. Seeing that the underworld ghost was dead, Qing Yi did not relax at all. She said directly, "Go and save Ziqin." Ibufan, who was rushing over, saw the situation here and immediately led the people to change direction. 2 underworld ghosts were dead. As long as the last one was killed, they would be free. At this moment, everyone shouted and rushed forward excitedly. At this time, Ziqin was fighting with the underworld ghost. Based on his physical memory and dexterity, he could only last 5 rounds. In the 6th round, the underworld ghost punched Ziqin and sent him flying. Even the bone sword was knocked out of his hand. Ziqin flew backward and landed on the ground. The bone sword had already fallen far away. He did not bother to pick it up and turn to run. There were several wounds left by the bone sword on the underworld ghost's body, but they were not serious. It roared and charged forward. In just 2 steps, it caught up with Ziqin. A punch landed on Ziqin's back. Ziqin coughed out blood and flew forward. Before he landed, the underworld ghost had already arrived in front of him and kicked out again. Bang! Ziqin's body changed direction in midair and smashed into a big tree before falling to the ground. Ziqin, who had landed, wanted to stand up. The underworld ghost had already arrived in front of him. With another kick, Ziqin's body flew horizontally. After falling to the ground, Ziqin coughed up blood again. The underworld ghost walked forward step by step, its murderous aura sweeping through the surroundings. Ziqin's body had been attacked several times. It was difficult for him to stand up at this moment. The underworld ghost came close and stepped on Ziqin's arm, causing intense pain. Ziqin stretched out his left hand, wanting to hit the other party. The next moment, a cracking sound was heard. His left arm had been broken by the underworld ghost. The intense pain caused Ziqin's forehead to be covered in cold sweat. The underworld ghost's eyes were cold. It leaned down and sucked at Zichen, who was close by. A devouring force fell on Zichen's body. Zichen felt a powerful force that seemed to want to split his body into two. That was his soul about to leave his body. In the distance, Qing Yi and the others had already heard the commotion and rushed over. After seeing this scene, she shouted, "No!" Everyone sped up. But how could their speed compare to the underworld ghost's devouring speed? The outcome seemed to be decided. Ibufan sighed, but it was too late. He saw that Zichen's soul had already left his body and was heading towards the underworld ghost's mouth. Qing Yi ran too fast and fell to the ground. The thorns cut her body, but she could no longer feel the pain. Her eyes were fixed on Zichen's soul. In the next moment, Zichen's soul was about to disappear. The little black beast's eyes suddenly burst out with light. At the same time, Zichen's soul that was about to be devoured suddenly released a strong light. The soul that was about to shrink seemed to turn into a soul light ball and return to Zichen's body. Then, a powerful gust of wind appeared. With Zichen as the center, a powerful devouring force appeared between heaven and earth. Chapter 4036. Everyone thought that Zichen was going to die, but they didn't expect that something would happen at this critical moment. Zichen's body glowed like a god of war. His aura suppressed Yu Gui's. The devouring power that fell on his body could no longer cause him any harm. Yu Gui's eyes changed because the food in front of it gave it a strong sense of danger. Everyone in the distance was shocked. The light on Zichen's body was so bright that many people couldn't open their eyes. Zichen felt power. This was a feeling that he had not felt in a long time. Power came from the spiritual qi in all directions. When it entered his body, it was naturally stored in his body. This power seemed to be a part of him, so Zichen didn't feel any discomfort. At the same time, a sense of power emerged from his heart. Yu Gui was also shocked by the scene in front of it, but when it felt a strong sense of danger, its eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. It regretted that it didn't end the battle quickly when it tortured Su Qin. It opened its mouth again, and a devouring power fell on Zichen's body. Zichen, who was still immersed in the feeling of power, felt the devouring power. He gently waved his hand, and a light of power flowed from his palm, and the devouring power disappeared. The underworld ghost was stunned. If its previous failure was due to the mutation, then this failure to devour was simply unbelievable. At this moment, a sharp whistling sound rang out. It was Zichen's fist. The fist hit Yu Gui's chest, and the powerful shock wave sent Yu Gui's body flying. Zichen looked at Yu Gui, and a smile appeared on his face. He didn't know what was going on, but he vaguely remembered that he had a similar power before, so he was no stranger to it. With a light tap of his foot, Zichen jumped up and came to Yu Gui's side. In the next moment, he attacked Yu Gui's head with lightning speed. The roar sounded again. It was as if a thunderclap had exploded. A powerful aura spread out in all directions, rolling up countless leaves in the forest. When the thunder disappeared, the forest suddenly became incomparably quiet. Everyone was still in the same position as before, standing there motionless, as if they had been attacked by a petrification spell. Zichen stood up. Yu Gui collapsed in front of him, no longer breathing. The last underworld ghost was also dead. All right, it's fine now. Zichen glanced at the petrified crowd. The little black beast came to Zichen's shoulder. Only then did everyone come back to their senses. Each and every one of them felt extremely incredulous. What's going on? Ibufan approached and asked. I'm not too sure either. It's like I suddenly gained strength. Zichen walked to the side. During the previous battle, his bone blade had fallen to the side. Then you're really amazing. Ibufan's eyes were filled with envy. He was clearly in danger, but he didn't expect that not only did he not die, he even awakened a powerful force. After picking up the bone knife, Zichen asked, "Are the others all dead?" "There's no news. They should all be dead." Bufan asked unwillingly, "How did your power appear?" "There's an ancient legend in this world." Li Haoqing walked over and took over the conversation. Everyone turned to look at him with curiosity in their eyes. "What legend?" Zichen asked. "It's a legend that has been passed down for a long time, but no one has ever believed it." Li Haoqing paused slightly, as if he was considering his words. "In the legend, there will be a great hero who will suddenly awaken a powerful force and lead us to fight against the ghosts of the world, allowing us to stand up and no longer be persecuted. Why don't I know about this legend?" "Old man, you're not making this up, are you?" Bufan looked at him with suspicion. "Not many people know about this legend. I only know because I've lived long enough. However, this is only a legend. No one believes in it because no one knows what awakening power means." Li Haoqing glanced at Zichen. No one knew about it before, but now they knew. The previous scene was Zichen awakening his power. Bufan looked at Zichen from head to toe. "You're that hero." Zichen took the bone knife and returned to the ghost. "Let's deal with these things first." He began to dissect the ghost. He had never dissected it before, but his technique was very skillful. Bufan took his weapon and squatted down beside Zichen. "Zichen, tell me how you awaken your power?" Zichen glanced at Bufan. Bufan said, "I think the hero they're talking about should be me. I believe I can awaken my power too." Zichen looked at Bufan. "You want to be a hero so much?" Bufan said, "It doesn't matter if I'm a hero or not. The main thing is power. I want to know how to awaken my power because I think I'm born extraordinary." Zichen thought about it seriously, while Bufan was looking forward to it. During this time, Zichen didn't stop dissecting the ghost. After a while, Zichen said, "Maybe it's because I saw death." Bufan was startled. He thought back to the previous moment. Zichen seemed to be only a hair's breadth away from death. Bufan muttered, "Could it be that I have to try it too?" Zichen looked at him and smiled. "If you're really confident you can give it a try," Bufan said. "If I don't awaken my power, will you help me?" Zichen said, "If you believe that I will help you, then the possibility of you awakening your power is almost zero." The others also came forward to help. At this moment, everyone was in a good mood, but the one who was in the best mood was naturally Qingyi. She originally thought that Zichen was going to die. She didn't expect that Zichen would awaken his power. She was happy for Zichen from the bottom of her heart. Where are we going next? After thinking about it, Bufan still felt that taking the initiative to seek death was not a reliable method. Moreover, what if Zichen didn't save him at the critical moment? Since it was related to his life, he couldn't be careless. If we're not wrong, there are only 5 ghosts here, and all 5 of them are dead. Then we have to go out and take a look. Zichen's eyes looked forward. The direction of the exit was the place where the ghosts came from, but Zichen didn't know what was there. Next, everyone went to dissect the other 2 ghosts and used their bones to make weapons. After staying here for 3 days, Zichen led everyone and left. Along the way, they saw a tall wall blocking their way out. This place was really like a captive place. At the end of the wall, there was a tall door. At this moment, the door was closed. Chapter 4037. This place was like a livestock farm, and the entrance was also the exit. It was right in front of everyone's eyes. However, the door was extremely tall, and with everyone's current strength, it was almost impossible to open it. This was the first time they had come here, and it was also the first time for the people who had lived here for generations. Everyone looked at Zichen, looking at him for help. After Li Haoqing's deliberate exaggeration, everyone knew about the legend of the hero. The Zichen in front of them was a godlike hero in their eyes, omnipotent. Zi-chan walked forward. At this moment, he was very nervous, not because he was worried that he could not open the door, but because he was nervous about the future. This was because he did not know what was outside the door. In his memory, he was born here. In addition, there were some vague memories of dreams, as if he had gone to an extraordinary place in the dream. However, a dream was a dream, and those dreams that were still fresh in his memory had long become blurry. Zi-chan took a deep breath and pushed open the sealed door. Outside was a green grassland, and there were some blooming flowers of various colors on the grassland. Everyone cried out in surprise, and they were very excited. After pushing open the door, Zi-chan walked forward. He left this place of captivity. The others also came out and started to run in this vast world. Many people were intoxicated by the air here. The air here seemed to be sweet. The flowers also seemed to be special. We're out, we're finally out. Ching-yi was also cheering and jumping, and she was very happy. Ibufan muttered, "We're out, but why did we come out? I feel like I've forgotten something." Zi-chan smiled faintly and said, "The reason we came out is for freedom. Now, there are no more underworld ghosts to devour us, and we have obtained the freedom we want." "Is that so?" Ibufan was a little confused. "What else? Why did we come out?" Zi-chan asked. Ibufan shook his head, obviously unable to give an answer. In the end, he said, "Maybe we really did come for freedom." The little black beast jumped in front of Zi-chan and gestured at him with its hands. No one knew what it was trying to say. Zi-chan crouched down, stretched out his hand, and said, "Little guy, I have to thank you this time. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have gotten our freedom. How about I give you a name? Hope?" The little black beast seemed to be dissatisfied and protested. "Hope! Hope!" Cheers sounded from all around again, and the little black beast reluctantly accepted this new name. Just as everyone was cheering for their freedom, Zi-chan walked forward alone. He wanted to go to the place where the underworld ghosts lived. Moreover, he was a little worried. What if the underworld ghosts were not the same 5? Not long after, Zi-chan saw a strange building. From afar, it looked like a small castle. This made Zi-chan's heart skip a beat. Could it be that this was where the underworld ghost lived? This place doesn't look small. Could there be ghosts here? Some people followed him and also noticed the scene. Their faces couldn't help but change. Zi-chan stretched out his hand and signaled the people behind him to stay back for now. He held the bone knife and walked forward alone. The castle wasn't big, but its shape was a little strange. Zi-chan slowly approached it. The castle's gate was ajar, and there was no movement from inside. Just as Zi-chan walked to the gate, a black ball of light suddenly flew out from inside. Zi-chan, who was already on guard, immediately raised the bone knife and slashed forward. The black ball of light separated from the middle. It was actually a ball of black flame. At this moment, there was still a trace of it on the bone knife. Zi-chan's expression became serious. He rushed in with the knife. He saw the 6th underworld ghost. It was holding a black wooden staff in its hand. It muttered something and pointed at Zi-chan. A ball of black flame appeared from the wooden staff and went straight for Zi-chan. Zi-chan was shocked. This was the first time he had encountered such an underworld ghost. The light of power flashed. He quickly dodged and rushed towards the underworld ghost in front of him. The underworld ghost began to retreat. During this time, balls of flame appeared one after another. While Zi-chan was dodging, he was also paying attention to his surroundings. This wasn't a place to live, but rather an existence similar to an altar. There were some stone pillars around, and there were engravings on the stone pillars. At this moment, the underworld ghost had already retreated to the altar. He was shocked by Zi-chan's power. In the next moment, the altar lit up, and a powerful aura emerged from it. Zi-chan only felt an indescribable pressure on his body. It was like when he was devoured. Under this pressure, he almost couldn't control his body. After seeing Zi Chen's change of expression, the underworld ghost holding the wooden staff on the altar couldn't help but smile. You actually awakened your power. Very amazing. It raised the wooden staff, pointed at Zichen, and said coldly, "But you still have to die." A straight beam of light went straight towards Zichen. The bone saber blocked the ray of light. How is this possible? Under the pressure of God, how can you move freely? Seeing Zichen blocking the light, the underworld ghost's face showed a touch of surprise. God. Zichen's body glowed as he resisted the pressure and walked forward. Not to mention just a wisp of pressure. Even if the God you speak of personally came, I would still slay God. This was the first time Zichen spoke in the underworld ghost's language. This made the underworld ghost even more frightened. Zichen raised the bone sword, tapped his foot, and rushed forward. The underworld ghost raised the wooden staff. The staff lit up and protected him. The light changed, and the underworld ghost's protection was broken. Zichen stood behind the underworld ghost, standing on the altar. The underworld ghost behind him had a slanted sword mark on its body. It looked down at the sword mark and fell down in disbelief. The blood dyed the altar and filled the runes. The runes around the altar seemed to absorb the blood and became even brighter. Zichen stood on the altar as if he was bathing in the sun. A warm power entered his body. Hearing that there was no more fighting inside, Qing Yi and Yi Bufan cautiously walked in. Seeing Zichen standing on the altar and the underworld ghost on the ground, their expressions changed. "Come here quickly." Zichen saw the two and shouted, "This place seems to be able to condense power on its own." Yi Bufan's eyes lit up and immediately walked up. Qing Yi followed behind. The two walked up the altar one after the other, making the small altar a little crowded. Then the light of power gathered around the two of them, and their bodies also lit up. "Power! I feel power!" Yi Bufan shouted excitedly, "I am a hero, the hero of the legends!" Chapter 4038. The smile on Zichen's face disappeared as he stared blankly ahead. What appeared from the ripples was a black piece of armor that looked like a black tortoise shell. It floated in front of Zichen and looked very extraordinary. Zichen hesitated for a moment before reaching out to take it. The armor was slightly cool to the touch, but there was nothing special about it. Looking at it carefully, there were some incomplete lines on it. Zichen didn't know what it was. Just as he was looking at it curiously, the changes in the surroundings suddenly stopped. The altar castle began to shake as if it would collapse at any moment. Smoke and dust fell from it. "Let's go!" Zichen shouted and immediately pulled Qing Yi to the door. But after a few steps, he saw that Yi Bufan was not moving. "Let's go! I can feel my power growing." Yi Bufan's whole body was glowing as he bathed in power. Zichen was speechless. Is your life more important, or is your power more important? After saying that, he ignored Yi Bufan and pulled Qing Yi to run. Just as he rushed out of the castle behind him collapsed. Yi Bufan also ran out amidst the smoke and dust. Obviously, power was very important to him, but his life was more important. Why did it collapse all of a sudden? Yi Bufan said gloomily. If this continued, his power would continue to grow without limit. Look in front of you. Zichen's eyes were looking in front of them. That was the direction they came from. Yi Bufan turned around and saw the towering wall that had been there for God knows how long. This wall had been there for as long as he could remember, and he didn't know how long it had been there. He didn't expect it to start collapsing today, just like the castle behind him. What's going on? Why did it collapse? Yi Bufan asked in confusion. Zichen looked back at the altar castle behind him and said, "Maybe it's because of it." Yi Bufan didn't dwell on this matter. Now that he had power, he was in an exceptionally good mood. "Haha, it's exactly the same as in my dream. Buffon laughed as the light of power surrounded him. From now on, I am your hero. When the surrounding people saw the problem, their eyes were filled with envy. Awakening his power meant that he had the means to fight against the underworld ghost and no longer had to fear it. The underworld ghost had been killed and the wall had collapsed. Everyone had truly regained their freedom. However, there was another problem that everyone had to face. What should they do in the future? For a moment, many people were in a dilemma, not knowing how to choose. I will continue to head to other places. There are still many people in this world waiting for us to save them. Buffon puffed out his chest and said, If everyone is going through hardships, then I am the hero who is born. I have the duty and responsibility to save them. Zichen wasn't moved by Buffon's generous words. Instead, he looked at Qingyi. Previously, Qingyi had also awakened her powers. She had the right to choose her own future. Qingyi said, Maybe we should go deeper. Zichen nodded. He had no objections. The others also cheered and expressed their willingness to follow. But there were still some who decided to stay, wanting to live a stable life here. Since everyone had decided to move forward, Zichen naturally didn't have any objections. Some people stayed. Some people were willing to follow Zichen. After a short pause, the group was divided into two groups. All of you will follow me from now on. From now on, I am your hero. Buffon, who was surrounded by the light of power, looked back at the crowd and said proudly. At this moment, he really wanted to find an opponent to test his power. Zichen looked at the piece of armor in his hand. It looked like a tortoise shell. The patterns on it weren't complete. It seemed that there were a lot of such things here. They walked for nearly 100 miles. As the sky was about to turn dark, Zichen signaled everyone to stop and rest. Buffon looked very regretful that he didn't show off his skills. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Zichen lit a bonfire. In the past, he didn't dare to attract the attention of the underworld ghost. Now, he naturally didn't have to worry. Everyone sat around the bonfire and began to talk and laugh, looking forward to the future. Among them, many people fantasized that they would also have great power. Even if they didn't have to fight against the underworld ghost, they could still protect themselves. Li Haoqing came to Zichen's side and sat down. Zichen had already recognized him as his grandfather, although he had never called him personally. Are you really going to move forward? Li Haoqing looked at Zichen and said with some worry, No one can be sure of the dangers in the future. Zichen said, There may be danger, but I have to go and take a look. Li Haoqing was very puzzled. Zichen continued, I always feel that I have forgotten something, but I can't remember what it is. Li Haoqing said, It's inevitable that everyone has dreams, but it's not good to take it seriously. According to the legends, you are our hero. The things in the dream are just distractions to you. As time passes, everything will fade away. Zichen didn't continue to discuss this issue with Li Haoqing. In fact, he had already recognized the vague memories of the past. It was indeed a dream, but in his heart he always felt that he had forgotten something. But no matter how he thought, he couldn't remember what it was. Guess what I saw? Suddenly, a voice came from afar. It's food, and it's wild food. Only the 3 awakened people could hear this voice. It was obviously the first time Qingyi heard such a voice. She was very shocked. Zichen's expression was relatively relaxed. He just glanced back and lost interest. The most excited person was Buffon because he was too familiar with this voice. It was the voice of the underworld ghost. After waiting for a whole day, the underworld ghost didn't appear. Unexpectedly, it appeared at night. He immediately stood up and looked in the direction of the voice. An underworld ghost appeared. Fear appeared on the faces of the others, and they all retreated. Buffon laughed and ran forward. Reckless things, I've been waiting for you for a long time, Dai. As he rushed forward, light flowed on his body and power surged. The underworld ghost was very surprised, but he was not afraid of the other party. He punched at Ibu Fan. The two fists collided, and a loud bang was heard. Both parties retreated. Ibu Fan laughed and moved forward again. Zichen, who was sitting on the ground, suddenly stood up and looked into the distance. He saw that another underworld ghost appeared in the dark, and there were 3 of them at once. After seeing the battle in front, the other party's face changed. One of them muttered, "This food is interesting." Chapter 4039. These dark specters were full of confidence, but Ibu Fan was even more confident than them. He shouted excitedly. His body was surrounded by the light of power as he rushed forward. The battle broke out. With a loud tremor, the dark specter's body was pushed back. Ibu Fan also took a few steps back. The dark specter's face was obviously surprised. Ibu Fan smiled excitedly and continued to rush forward. His previous probing had given him hope of winning against the enemy, the hope of becoming a great hero. At this time, the other 3 dark specters came out one after another. They also noticed the battle over there, but they didn't care. Zichen stood up. A machete appeared in his hand. He ran forward, holding the machete tightly in his hand. Qing Yi moved forward from the other side. She chose a target. Seeing that the 3 of them had awakened their power, the dark specters were no longer relaxed. Fortunately, they had the advantage in numbers. At this time, Hope jumped from Zichen's shoulder and flew towards the last target. In an instant, a black light flashed like a bolt of lightning and appeared behind the dark specter. That was power. Unknowingly, Hope also awakened her power. Zichen and the dark specter passed each other. The machete flashed, and a light flashed past the dark specter's body. Blood spurted out. This was a fatal blow. Zichen put away the machete, looked at the corpse on the ground after a slight hesitation. He didn't go forward to deal with it himself. At this time, Ibu Fan and Qing Yi had already finished off their opponents. The 4 dark specters were all dead. Ibu Fan, who wanted to show off, now lost a lot of interest, because his efficiency was much slower than Zichen's. The others rushed forward and began to dissect the dark specter's body, using the bones to refine weapons. Ibu Fan came to Zichen's side and said, "Since there are dark specters here, maybe there are other places similar to where we live." Zichen nodded. "This is indeed a possibility. Tomorrow morning we will split into 3 groups and go out to take a look." The next morning, the group split up and set off in 3 different directions. Everything has been agreed. Everyone will continue to meet at noon. After only half an hour, Zichen made a new discovery. He saw a towering wall, which seemed to be another place of confinement. Someone exclaimed softly. Zichen waved his hand, and a person quickly approached. Zichen whispered a few words to the person, and the person quickly left. About a quarter of an hour later, 3 shadow ghosts appeared. Fortunately, Zichen had already instructed the others to conceal themselves. Otherwise, they would have been discovered. When the 3 wraiths reached the wall, they suddenly stopped. Zichen held his breath. The 3 ghosts looked at each other, then looked around. Then they opened the door and entered the enclosure. The people hiding in the back all breathed a sigh of relief. The reason why the ghost had paused earlier was probably because it had sensed their aura, but had mistakenly thought that it was coming from the captivity. Zichen looked at the closed door with a hesitant expression. According to his plan, he should wait for Qing Yi and Ibu Fan to arrive first. Then the 3 of them would join forces to deal with the dark specters. Who would have thought that 3 of them would come at once? These 3 ghosts were obviously going to devour life to replenish their energy. The hesitant Zichen glanced at Hope. The little beast, who had already recognized this name, was eager to try it out. Zichen whispered, "You guys stay here. I'll go inside and take a look." The others nodded and then took the initiative to retreat. Zichen walked forward and soon arrived in front of the door. He pushed the door open and entered. After entering the enclosure, Zichen found that it was larger than the area they were in, and the walls were taller. He glanced at Hope and asked, "Can you determine their direction?" Hope couldn't speak, but it could understand Zi-Chen's words. It could also use gestures to express itself. It pointed forward. Zi-Chen began to speed up. Just as he stepped onto a mountain, Zi-Chen heard a scream of horror. Looking forward, the three ghosts were like hungry wolves chasing a flock of sheep, following the humans. Some of them had already been devoured. The others were running away in fear. Zi-Chen took a deep breath. His eyes gradually turned cold. He clenched the bone blade in his hand and rushed down the mountain. "Bastards!" He roared, his voice exploding like thunder. This roar immediately attracted the attention of Yu Gui. It also attracted a lot of people's attention. The three ghosts turned around, and when they saw an uninvited guest, their expressions changed slightly. A woman with a child in her arms, who had just survived the disaster, ran away in fear the moment the ghost stopped. Zi-Chen ran over, the bone blade in his hand flashing. "Bastards, come and die!" His voice rang out again, but this time it was in a language that Yu Gui could understand. The three ghosts were angry. They gave up their original target and rushed towards Zi-Chen. Zi-Chen's gaze fell on the three ghosts. They were in different positions, one in front and one behind. Zi-Chen locked onto the one closest to him and sped up. Hope stood on his shoulder, also ready to attack. As the two sides approached each other, Zi-Chen tapped his foot and leaped forward. At the same time, Hope borrowed the momentum from Zi-Chen's shoulder. Its hidden claws appeared, and a cold light flashed across them. In an instant, Zi-Chen and Hope passed by Yu Gui, one on the left and one on the right. Zi-Chen's body rolled behind the ghosts. There were several wounds on his chest, blood flowing out. On the blade of the bone blade, there was also blood dripping. The difference was that the blood on the bone blade was the ghost's. The ghost's body fell to the ground with a bang and never stood up again. In the distance, the humans who had stopped running were all stunned when they saw the scene. In their memories, everyone was food, and the underworld ghost was invincible. But today, such an invincible existence was killed by a human. When the other two ghosts saw this, their expressions became serious. Then, the two of them gathered together and joined forces to attack Zi-Chen. Zi-Chen looked at the two approaching ghosts and said, "The next battle will be difficult. Be careful." Previously, Zi-Chen was able to kill his enemies in one move because the ghosts did not understand his true strength. Now that he chose to expose himself, the ghosts were prepared. This battle will be much more difficult. Zi-Chen stepped forward and slashed with the bone blade in his hand, hoping to rush to the other ghost. The bone blade flashed, but it missed. The ghost dodged in time. After dodging Zi-Chen's attack, the ghost opened its mouth and inhaled. This was devouring. Zi-Chen's body was surrounded by light, immediately dispersing the devouring power. At the same time, the bone blade in his hand slashed again. The ghost took a step back and dodged again. Chapter 4040. Zi-Chen's third slash injured Yu Gui. At the same time, Zi-Chen's fourth slash appeared. His speed was not fast, but there seemed to be a strange rhythm to his footsteps. Zi-Chen's figure flashed and missed Yu Gui's attack. Then the fourth slash fell and cut Yu Gui's forearm. Zi-Chen began to move around Yu Gui. The power of each slash was constantly superimposed. Zi-Chen didn't know what was going on. It was as if when he was fighting with the ghost, his body naturally did this kind of action. Moving forward, rushing, dodging, all of these seemed to be subconscious movements. It was as if his body had made these movements countless times, so much so that his consciousness could not keep up. Chi, chi, chi. Under Zi-Chen's strange performance, more and more wounds appeared on Yu Gui's body. Yu Gui roared again and again, but it could not do anything to Zi-Chen. In the distance, the survivors who had escaped earlier all gathered together at this moment. They were shocked to see the battle in front of them. The human with the bone knife was very agile. The powerful Yugue could not do anything to him. At the same time, the strange little beast also showed its extraordinary means. It beat Yugue until he could not do anything. Chen did not know what was going on, but under his continuous attacks, Yugue in front of him clearly lost his balance and direction. He was keenly aware of the opportunity to attack. Chen suddenly used his strength and slashed Yugue's neck with the bone knife. Blood spurted out, and Yugue fell to the ground dead. On the other side, Hope had ended the battle early. Chen held the bone knife and looked at the distance. Those people were standing there, motionless. They looked at Chen with curiosity and awe. Chen opened his mouth to say something, but at this time a voice came from behind. "You are free." It was Fan and Qingyi. After hearing the news, the two rushed here. They did not expect to see Chen defeating the enemy. Fan was a little regretful, but this did not prevent him from being a hero. There were a lot of people following behind him. After they arrived, they started to dissect the body of the ghost. Fan continued to walk forward, to prove his worth as a hero to everyone. Chen looked at Qingyi. "Why are you here so soon?" Qingyi said, "I discovered a castle that was similar to the sacrificial altar from last time. Thus, I was preparing to come back and report. On my way back, I met Fan. He also discovered something." Chen glanced into the distance. Fan had already gathered the others and was talking loudly about something with spittle flying everywhere. The others had looks of admiration on their faces. Qingyi said, "The place that Fan discovered might be the place where the underworld ghosts live." Previously, in addition to the altar, Chen had also discovered some buildings. Those were the residences of the 5 dead ghosts. They had built houses and did not live in caves. "What are your plans?" Qingyi looked at Chen. Chen said, "Let's go to the place where the underworld ghosts live first. After that, we'll deal with the abnormality at the altar." After bragging, Fan brought everyone over. The number of people here was much more than their group. It could be said that they were in a grandiose formation. Coming in front of Chen, Fan pointed behind him and said proudly, "They will be following us from now on. If there's anything you need, just tell me quickly." At this time, many people were curiously watching Chen's team dissect the bones of the underworld ghosts. A quarter of an hour ago, the underworld ghosts were invincible in their hearts. They did not expect that in just a quarter of an hour, they would become corpses. Moreover, that guy named Fan even said that he would lead everyone to kill the other underworld ghosts and give them a real world of freedom. Chen said, "There are some questions that we need to ask. We need to know more about the underworld ghosts here, such as their numbers." Although Chen's team, including Hope, had 4 awakened ones, this place of captivity was very large. Perhaps the number of underworld ghosts here was very high. This was very important information, but unfortunately, after Chen asked, no one could give him an answer. No one had paid attention to this problem. In fact, they did not even know that the underworld ghosts looked different from other underworld ghosts. If they don't want to resist, they won't care about this kind of thing. Qingyi said lightly, "Let me go over there and have a look." "I'll go with Hope." Chen said, "Hope's body is small. Maybe we can go deeper and investigate." Fan led everyone away from this place. Chen, on the other hand, headed towards the location provided by Fan. As they neared, they saw a lot of buildings. Roughly estimating the number of hell ghosts here, it was several times more than the place they were at before. Chen hid in the dark and signaled Hope to go and investigate more accurately. Hope turned into a shadow in the dark and quickly disappeared from Chen's sight. After about half an hour, Hope reappeared. At the same time, she reported an accurate number to Chen, 22. There were 22 underworld ghosts here, not including the 3 they killed during the day. Zi-Chin suspected that the 4 underworld ghosts from yesterday also came from this place. Zi-Chin planned to go back and discuss with the others before making a decision. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to leave, Hope tugged at the corner of his clothes. At the same time, she stretched out her sharp claws and made a throat-slitting gesture. Zi-Chen's expression changed slightly. "You mean we should go now?" Hope nodded. Zi-Chen was a little hesitant. Hope gestured again. This time, Zi-Chen understood. All the underworld ghosts were sleeping. Obviously, this was the best time to make a move. It made sense. According to the information Zi-Chen had obtained so far, the underworld ghosts were invincible in this place. They had almost no natural enemies. So, of course, they would not be vigilant of things around them. During rest time, it was normal that no one would keep watch. After a little consideration, Zi-Chen decided to trust Hope. He crouched down, gripped the machete tightly, and followed Hope in the dark. He entered a room and heard the sound of snoring. Without hesitation, Zi-Chen went forward and slit the person's neck with the machete. Zi-Chen walked past one building after another like a ghost in the night. Not long after, the faint smell of blood wafted out. Everything was going smoothly, just as Zi-Chen thought that maybe tonight he might be able to kill all the underworld ghosts in this place. Hope suddenly pulled him back. Zi-Chen glanced at Hope. She seemed to have noticed something, so Zi-Chen quietly retreated and hid in the darkness. Zi-Chen held his breath and did not make any sound. Chapter 40-41. A faint smell of blood permeated the air. Zi-Chen hid in the dark and saw a black shadow pass by him. There was no sound. If it wasn't for Hope's warning, Zi-Chen would have been discovered by the other party. It was a person, a stranger that Zi-Chen was sure he had never seen before. But why would such a stranger come here at this time? Zi-Chen was puzzled. But soon, Zi-Chen discovered that there was more than one person. Daring to sneak into the place where the ghosts lived, Zi-Chen guessed that these people were all awakened ones. He had always thought that the 3 of them were the only awakened ones in this area. Not knowing the temperament of the other awakened ones, Zi-Chen was ready to retreat. Suddenly there was a roar. It was one of the awakened ghosts. Then more ghosts woke up. There was the sound of fighting. Zi-Chen saw the flowing light of power. Those who sneaked in were all awakened ones. This surprised him, but there were strong and weak ones among the awakened ones. Zi-Chen vaguely saw one of the awakened ones being knocked to the ground and then swallowed by the ghost. After swallowing the awakened one, the ghost's power became stronger, and its whole body emitted a bright light. This obvious power made Zi-Chen's expression change. The others saw that the situation was not good and immediately began to retreat. The glowing ghost let out a commanding roar, and the other ghosts chased after them. Some of the rooms were quiet. The ghost cursed angrily. How dare they not listen to its order? It shouted that it wanted to find these dead pigs to settle accounts. Zi-Chen began to retreat. He didn't want to encounter such a powerful existence. While retreating, Zi-Chen noticed that the few people who were running away were surrounded and were in danger. Although they had ruined his plan, they were still awakened ones. If he didn't help them now, they would all die when the powerful ghost spirit approached. Moreover, the ghost would grow stronger and become an unparalleled existence. Zi-Chen approached from the dark and appeared like lightning. The bone sword in his hand drew a light. Chi! A ghost's throat was cut open, and it fell to the ground with its head raised. When the other ghosts saw this, they all turned around vigilantly. Zi-Chen's figure had already disappeared from the other side. While he was in a daze, the awakened ones all left. The specters glanced at the corpse on the ground. They seemed to be frightened and did not immediately pursue. After taking action, Zi-Chen did not meet up with the awakened ones. Instead, he returned to the agreed-upon location. Seeing that Zi-Chen had returned, Qing Yi and Ibu Fan immediately went up to greet him. For safety reasons, They didn't light a bonfire and didn't even communicate with each other. The surroundings were very quiet. "What's the situation?" Ibufan asked. Zi Chen told them what he had seen and heard. When they learned that there were more than 20 dark ghosts there, both of them were shocked. After hearing that there were other awakened ones, both of them were in disbelief. Qing Yi said, "It seems that we are not the only ones who have awakened. Since there are other awakened ones in this world, it might be a good thing for us." Zi Chen neither nodded nor shook his head. Ibufan said, "It might not be a good thing." Qing Yi didn't understand what he meant. She thought that Ibufan was worried that other people would come to snatch the hero position from him. "What should we do now?" Qing Yi looked at Zi Chen. "Let everyone retreat first. So many ghosts have died tonight. They will definitely catch up with us." Zi Chen said in a deep voice, "While retreating, set up traps." Everyone began to retreat. Their original plan to completely destroy the specters was stopped because of the appearance of those people. The only thing that Zi Chen was worried about now was whether the powerful specter would bring people to chase after them. Everyone began to move. They retreated for dozens of miles until they came to a forest and stopped. Following Zi Chen's instructions, they began to set up some traps to deal with the enemy. This night, almost no one rested. The specters that they imagined did not chase after them. Zi Chen secretly breathed a sigh of relief. "You guys are quite good at hiding." Suddenly, a faint laugh sounded. A person walked out of the dense forest in front of them. It was a young man wearing a robe made of specters' beast skin. He had a cold smile on his face as he appeared in front of everyone. "Who are you?" Ibufan felt the other party's ill intentions and said indifferently. Footsteps sounded, and one figure after another appeared from the forest. Among these people, Zi Chen saw a few familiar faces. They were the people who were besieged last night. The purpose of these people was not obvious. Zi Chen's people all held bone weapons and looked at those people. The leader of the beast-robed young man glanced around and stopped on those bone weapons. "Is it them?" The young man said. A young man came forward and pointed at Zi Chen. "Yes, it's him. He's the one who ruined our plan." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Qing Yi said in dissatisfaction. The young man glanced at Qing Yi, and a light flashed in his eyes. "He ruined our plan last night and caused the death of one of our brothers." Qing Yi and Ibufan's expressions changed. Zi Chen had already told them about this matter yesterday, but the two of them had different versions of the story. "Are you sure it's me who ruined your plan?" Zi Chen looked at the young man, but his expression did not change much. "Of course it's you." The young man pointed at Zi Chen. "If it weren't for you, how could Danny die?" The young man smiled playfully. "So many of our brothers saw it. Are you not going to admit it?" The beast-robed young man pointed at Qing Yi and said, "Don't worry. I'm not here to make things difficult for you. It's just that one of our brothers died. You should pay some compensation. I think it's her. We're all hunters, so I won't bully you." The other party named Qing Yi. "Why?" Qing Yi was angry. Ibufan sneered. "This is the first time I've seen such a shameless act. If you want to fight, then come. We'll accompany you to the end." He waved the bone stick a few times, and a light flashed from the stick. The young man's smile didn't fade. The other people around them walked over. Judging by their aura, they should be hunters. There were more than a dozen of them. They had an absolute advantage in numbers. "What you know may be different from what I know." Zi Chen stepped forward and said, "Last night I arrived before you. After killing a few specters, your people came. Then I hid in the dark and let you do whatever you want. Unfortunately, your people woke up the sleeping specters and were killed by them after being exposed. Your people saw that the situation was not good and planned to escape." Chapter 4042. As soon as he said that The expressions on their faces became unnatural. The young man even shouted angrily, "Nonsense, nonsense!" "You know very well whether it's nonsense or not," Chen said calmly. "If you guys didn't suddenly appear, I would have killed all the underworld ghosts by now. Speaking of which, you guys were the ones who ruined my plan and exposed my identity." "Well, I haven't gone to look for you guys yet. I didn't expect you guys to come looking for trouble first." Bufan looked at the young man proudly, his eyes filled with provocation and pride. He seemed to be saying, "What do you have to say now?" The smile on the young man's face froze. "Is that true?" Everyone lowered their heads. Only the young man said loudly, "Nonsense, he's talking nonsense. Those underworld ghosts were killed by us." The young man's face became gloomy. As if he didn't need to tell the truth anymore, he said angrily, "Slap your mouth." With a simple sentence, the young man didn't dare to argue anymore. He began to slap his own mouth. The sound was very loud. When the young man looked back at Chen, a smile appeared on his face again. "Looks like this is a misunderstanding. Just a misunderstanding. My name is Carterman. How should I address you guys?" Carterman's attitude changed so quickly that it was out of Chen's expectation. But his character of being able to admit his mistake was not bad. "Chen, what about you two?" Carterman looked at Bufan and Qing Yi. After the two introduced themselves, Carterman laughed and said, "Misunderstanding. People say that they don't know each other until they fight, but we don't know each other until there's a misunderstanding. You guys fought against the underworld ghosts for the underworld ghost-devouring armor, right? Underworld ghost-devouring armor?" Chen was puzzled. It was also the first time Bufan and Qing Yi heard this strange name. "What? You guys don't know?" After taking in the expressions of the three of them, Carterman was slightly stunned. Chen shook his head, indicating that he knew nothing about it. Carterman explained, "The underworld ghost-devouring armor is the fastest shortcut for us to get the underworld ghost-devouring technique. Once we get the underworld ghost-devouring armor, we can become like the underworld ghosts and have the ability to devour everything." Oh, this was the first time Chen had heard of it, so he was a little curious. A light flashed in Carterman's hand, and a black piece of armor appeared. "This is it." After Bufan and Qing Yi saw this, they looked at Chen. This was because Chen often took out this kind of thing to look at. Looking at the patterns on it, it was almost the same. "This is the ghost-devouring armor? I have one too." Chen took it out and asked, "Is this it?" Carterman glanced at the piece of armor in Chen's hand as a light flashed across his eyes. "That's right, this is it." Chen said regretfully, "It's a pity that I didn't find any other use for it, even after studying it for a long time." Carterman smiled mysteriously and said, "That's because there aren't enough of them." "What do you mean?" Chen looked at Carterman. Carterman extended 5 fingers and said, "It's very simple. You just need to gather 5 pieces of this thing, and you'll get the complete Devour God art. Of course, this piece won't work. And if you want to go from awakening to devour, this is the only shortcut." Looking at Chen's confused expression, Carterman said, "Right now, we're all in the awakening stage. Although we can fight with ghosts, we can't grow on our own. Only when we reach the devour stage can we devour everything to grow, suppress ghosts, and drive them away." Carterman suddenly smiled mysteriously. "This kind of devour even includes devour, ghost devour?" Chen was very shocked. Devour, ghost devour meant that he could treat ghosts as food? Carterman looked behind Chen and scanned the faces of the ordinary people. He estimated the number of people and said, "In your team, only the 3 of you have awakened." Chen nodded. "Then why don't we work together? After all, after we get the ghost-devouring armor, we share it. Whether we can learn the Devour God art or not depends on luck." Carterman smiled and said, "And after we work together, we only need to get 3 more pieces." Chen didn't have any opinions about working together, but he still needed to see what the other two thought about this. Carterman was obviously very knowledgeable, and since they were in the same camp, they probably wouldn't kill each other. Bufan and Qing didn't have any opinions and nodded at the same time. Then, the group discussed how to get rid of the ghosts in this area. According to Zichen's idea, they should lure all the ghosts here and kill them. After all, there were traps here. These lousy traps can kill the ghost. The young man, who slapped his face before glanced at his swollen lips, and was very disdainful of those traps. Of course, before we awakened, we used these traps to kill a few ghosts. Bufan said proudly, compared to fighting and killing, this method is more reliable. Oh, your mouth should still hurt, so try not to talk too much. The young man seemed to be very unconvinced. He wanted to argue a little more, but he was fiercely glared at by Carterman. Shut up. We'll do as you say, Zichin. But how are we going to lure those specters over? Zichin said, they have no choice but to come here because I've already taken those people away, so they have no source of food. Carterman smiled and said, I see. In that case, in order to show my sincerity, I'll leave 5 people here for you. As for the sacrificial ground, I'll take the others and conquer it. Don't worry, once we get the ghost-devouring armor, it will be our shared treasure. Carterman had already explained to Zichin the function of the altar before. In that place, the ghosts can use more powerful power and even some magic. Zichin didn't have any opinions. It was better not to take risks. After a quick discussion, Carterman left 5 awakened ones and left with the others. At the same time, he also took the young man with him. On the other hand, Zichin gestured for everyone to prepare and wait for the ambush to begin. Bufan went out again to lure the ghosts. The young man followed behind Carterman. His mouth was still swollen, so he asked in confusion, Big brother, why are we working with him? Only 3 of them have awakened. Wouldn't it be better to kill the 3 of them and take the devouring armor? Carterman looked at the young man coldly and said, You're quite bold. You even dare to lie like this? The young man lowered his head and didn't say anything. That Zichin dared to attack the ghosts alone. He's definitely not an ordinary existence. If we work with him, our battle power will only be stronger. Carterman said, I believe that we can gather enough devouring armor in a short time. Once it becomes a theurgy, what power can do to us? So, big brother, you really want to work with that Zichin? Are you really willing to share the results with him? The young man was a little anxious. Carterman knocked the young man's head. Don't say such stupid things in the future. Only by working together can we become stronger, understand? On the same day, Zichin and Carterman split into 2 groups. One group schemed against the ghosts, causing the ghosts to be completely annihilated. The other group attacked the altar and killed all the ghosts, and Carterman successfully obtained the devouring armor. Chapter 40-43. After obtaining the devourer armor, a smile appeared on the corner of Carterman's mouth. He already had 3 pieces. The dawn of victory was in sight. He immediately led his people back. At the same time, he told this good news to Zichin. This also signified the sincerity and integrity of their cooperation. After that, the 2 sides officially merged. During this time, Zichin gave everyone a chance to choose, to stay or to leave. In the end, everyone chose to stay. This was somewhat unexpected. After that, Zichin found out that the reason for this was because Carterman said that ordinary people could also awaken. So, those who stayed were mostly people who wanted to awaken their powers. The 2 groups combined into one had more than 1,000 people. With so many people, it was impossible for them to move together. Everyone needed a temporary place to stay. Carterman seemed to have thought of this long ago. He directly said, Why don't we just stay at the previous place? After the altar collapsed, the previous place of confinement also collapsed. Now, that place had become a free land. After settling everyone, Chen and the Awakened Ones continued to go deeper. During this time, the two sides had already discussed. Once they found another altar, they would first let some ordinary people sense it and see if they could awaken it before taking away the Devourer armor. 2 days later, they found another place where the ghosts lived. After 2 days of fighting, all the ghosts were killed. Then, they led a group of people and arrived at the altar. Every place where the ghosts lived had an altar, and this altar was the foundation of their foothold. The confinement area was activated by this altar. These were all things that Carterman told Chen. However, what Chen could not understand was how the humans in the confinement area were raised. Behind Chen, apart from the Awakened Ones, there were also dozens of ordinary people standing. Among them was Li Haoqing. Although he was an old man because he was Chen's grandfather, he occupied the position of a young person. Those who came with Chen did not have any objections. After all, if it were not for Chen, they would have died long ago. Everyone be careful. After entering, there may be a fierce battle. Carterman naturally assumed the role of the leader. He waved his hand and signaled everyone to move forward. With Oz taking the lead, the others followed suit. Oz was the young man who had slapped him last time. After a few days of getting along with him, Chen found that he was a frivolous and prideful young man, but he also had a good side. For example, he was warm-hearted and even kind-hearted. This time, he took the risk and walked at the very front. Before entering the gate, there was no danger. However, after entering, the altar lit up. There were more than a dozen underworld ghosts guarding it. A fierce battle broke out. The battle was over. Chen's side had 5 people injured. 3 were seriously injured and 2 were dead. Yu Gui's side had all been killed. During the battle, Chen noticed that there was a difference in strength between the Awakened Ones. His, Ibu Fan, and Qing Yi's strength were definitely top-notch. That was why they were able to take on a single dark ghost, killing the most enemies and suffering the least losses. After the battle was over, everyone deliberately kept the altar intact so that others could go up and comprehend it. The effect was not bad. 5 people had successfully awakened, and Li Haoqing was one of them. After everyone had tried it, Carterman walked up the altar. Chen followed behind him. The energy in the surroundings began to surge. Waves of energy gathered at the altar. Chen felt that his strength began to increase. This kind of increase could be clearly felt. The others did not seem to feel the same. They were just enveloped by the energy. At most, they only recovered the energy they had consumed. Carterman stretched out his hand, waiting for the underworld ghost-devouring armor to appear. After a dozen breaths, there was no reaction at all. The building began to shake. It was on the verge of collapse. Chen glanced at Carterman. Carterman shook his head regretfully. He had told Chen in advance that not all altars could successfully obtain the underworld ghost-devouring armor. The probability was actually very low. Obviously, he did not get it this time. Everyone rushed out of the altar and saw the collapse of the altar. At the same time, they also saw the collapse of the confinement area not far away. Some were regretful, some were excited. Looking at the collapsed altar, Carterman's face was full of regret. The others were the same. It was because they were so close to success. Chen understood why they were so eager to get the underworld ghost-devouring armor. It was because their strength was indeed weaker than the underworld ghost-devouring armor. Moreover, their awakening method seemed to be different from the others. For example, 4 of the 5 awakened ones today were from Carterman's team. Only Li Haoqing was from Chen's team. Although Li Haoqing had not participated in a battle yet, Chen could sense that Li Haoqing was stronger than the other 4 awakened ones. Seeing this scene, Ibu Fan said calmly, "Since you all want that armor piece so much, why not find more teams?" Carterman looked at him in confusion. Ibu Fan said, "Find more awakened teams. If everyone has a piece of the underworld ghost-devouring armor, won't you have enough people?" Carterman smiled and said, The possibility of success is very high. But I wonder what you think, Zichin? What do you mean? Zichin was a little puzzled. Once there are more people, I'm afraid there will be some problems and disagreements in dealing with certain things. This is also the reason why I haven't implemented it. It's because I've been worried about it. Carterman said. This was true. Awakened ones were usually the leaders of their respective teams. Once they merged, the entire team could only have one leader. For example, if Zichun and Carterman's teams merged, then nominally, everyone would be under Carterman's management. Zichin was now equivalent to a leader. Zichin thought for a moment and said, "You don't have to worry about that. On small matters, each team can make their own decisions. On big matters, everyone can discuss. Moreover, if we cooperate, the benefits for us are not small. After all, no one can guarantee how large the underworld ghost-devouring armor will be in the future." Zichin had no objection, and Carterman had no objection either. The number of awakened ones on their side had long exceeded 20. They had the absolute right to speak on everything. After that, they no longer went deeper. Instead, they tried to find some nearby teams of awakened ones. It had to be said that after a few days, they still had some gains. On the second day, they found 2 awakened ones who were acting alone. After they awakened their power, they escaped from their original place and did not try to hunt the underworld ghost. After learning that there were nearly 30 awakened ones on Carterman's side, they joined without hesitation. They did not have the devouring armor on them. On the day they joined the team, Zichen and Ibufan led the team. The 2 awakened ones were responsible for leading the way. They went to the place where the 2 of them were kept in captivity. After a battle, all the underworld ghosts were killed and the altar was destroyed. This time their luck was still bad. They did not get the devouring armor and returned without success. The good thing was that there were 3 more awakened ones in the team. They were Carterman's men. After the underworld ghosts were killed, the place where the underworld ghosts were kept collapsed. The 2 awakened ones who escaped before went to bring everyone out and join the team. A few days later, they met another team. Carterman took them in. Their team began to grow. Although they did not have the devouring armor, the number of people was much more than before. Gradually, some people proposed to give the team a name. After everyone's strong recommendation, a force called the Card Alliance was formed. The number of members was more than 2,000. The number of awakened ones was as high as 50. About a month later, after the 30th sunrise, Carterman announced a piece of news. He divided the more than 2,000 people in Card League into 2 groups. One group of 500 people would be under his management, while the other 1,500 people would be under the management of other hunters. Zichin saw all of this but did not say anything. Carterman's move was obviously a division of power, and he did not ask for anyone's permission. It turned out that the hundreds of people brought by Zichin had been completely disrupted and were divided among the others. The next group was still expanding. Carterman was still looking for other awakened ones. Finally, on the 60th sunrise, they recruited a team with the devouring armor. For everyone, this was a great thing. The awakened ones were in an uproar. Only the last one was left. Some people were discussing whether or not they should go deeper and challenge the underworld ghost's power again. Perhaps they would be able to obtain some benefits. But after sending out the awakened ones to investigate, they got a bad news. The nearest ghost force had more than 100 ghosts. This was an extremely huge number. No one dared to provoke them. Even Zichen's heart was filled with fear. So, the plan to move forward was cancelled. Everyone continued to look for allies. After another 15 sunrises, after receiving a team of 15 awakened ones, the Card Alliance finally collected the devouring armor. As the absolute leader of the Card Alliance, Carterman gathered everyone together. On his left was the newly appointed second leader, Luke. He had just been recruited not long ago, and he was the leader of the force with 15 hunters. Carterman's condition for recruiting him was to give him the second position of the Card League. In the original place of captivity, which was now the camp, Carterman sat on a man-made chair and glanced at everyone. There was an unconcealable excitement in his eyes. Everyone, the devouring armor is finally collected. Next, who can smoothly advance to the devouring armor will depend on everyone's luck and luck. The surrounding atmosphere immediately became lively. Everyone was filled with anticipation for the devouring mirror. There are people guarding outside. No one can come in. Everyone, let us first fuse with the devouring armor. Carterman stood up and said excitedly, and I announce that the first one to break through will be the new leader of the Card Alliance. Cheers sounded. All the awakened ones were full of enthusiasm. At the same time, Zi-chan and two others also stood up and took out the devouring armor. Chapter 4044. The ghost devouring armor required 5 pieces. Carterman had 2 pieces, while Zi-chen, Luke, and White each had 1. After taking out the devouring armor, perhaps it sensed their presence, but the devouring armor lit up on its own. A suction force was released from the 5 pieces of ghost devouring armor, and there was a connection between them. At this moment, everyone's attention was on the devouring armor. Everyone held their breaths, and their expressions became very nervous. Carterman smiled and said, "Brothers, shall we begin?" White also smiled. "Let's do this. Let's see who will be the first to comprehend it." After saying that, he let go of the devouring armor in his hand. The devouring armor did not land on the ground, but flew forward. As the second leader, Luke also smiled. That will depend on everyone's aptitude. He also let go of the devouring armor in his hand. The devouring armor flew forward and combined with White's devouring armor that was floating in the air. The light that was released became even brighter. Zi-chin took a step forward, and behind him, Ibu Fan, Qing-yi, and Li Haoqing took a step forward at the same time. According to the previous agreement, those who had the devouring armor would be able to lead the others to an advantageous position. Zi-chen's devouring armor was also pieced together in the air, and the devouring armor's light became even brighter. Only Carterman was left. Everyone looked at Carterman, and whether they could change their future depended on what happened next. Carterman took a deep breath and let go of the 2 pieces of devouring armor in his hand. The 2 pieces of devouring armor were like 2 black lightning bolts, and they instantly flew into the air. The 5 pieces of devouring armor were pieced together. The patterns on the armor were pieced together, and a blazing black light bloomed, and within the patterns, streaks of golden light lit up. There was a hint of golden light in the black, and it lit up the spacious meeting room. There was a strand of mysterious energy that entered everyone's body. In an instant, everyone's body felt strange, and a powerful feeling emerged in their hearts. Comprehend! Carterman shouted loudly and began to comprehend. The others followed suit, and they all began to comprehend. Zi-chan was no exception, and so were the 4 people behind him. All the hunters present, whether useful or not, sat cross-legged at this moment, letting the light in the sky fall on their bodies. Then he calmed his heart and meditated. I don't want to do anything. Time slowly passed. The room was quiet, and only the black light enveloped the room. Not only did the patterns on the 5 pieces of armor not fade with the passage of time, they became even brighter. Vaguely, the golden lines seemed to be expanding, as if they were going to drown out the black parts. Outside the room, there were some ordinary people with great strength. They held weapons made of animal bones in their hands, guarding the surroundings loyally. Although they were puzzled as to why the room had suddenly become incomparably quiet, no one turned around to investigate, because they knew very well that only when these people were strong could they be truly safe. Time continued to pass. The fused black pieces of armor turned golden. Its entire body glowed with golden light, illuminating the surroundings again. Everyone's faces were dyed in gold. After the black light was completely replaced by the golden light, everyone's body trembled. They seemed to have gained something. Zichen's consciousness came to a strange place. There was nothing here like a place of nothingness, but there was a voice. You succeeded. This was an old voice. Zichen couldn't see the person, but this voice gave him a familiar feeling. It seemed that at some time, in some dream, he had heard this voice before. Who are you? Zichen shouted loudly. At the same time, he looked around carefully, but he couldn't see anyone. When will you come back? Are you lost? Do you know who you are? That old voice sounded again, as if it existed in ancient times, crossing time and space, but also as if it was talking to itself. I am Zichen. Of course I know who I am. Who are you? Where are you? Zichen shouted. You are talking to me. Do you know who I am? Zichen, who was sitting cross-legged, began to change his expression. Under the golden light, he frowned, as if he was trying hard to recall something, but he couldn't remember it. On the other side, Qing-yi seemed to have fallen into a certain scene. Her beautiful face was filled with pain, and then tears fell from her eyes. Yi Bufan's lips curled into a smile, as if he had seen a beautiful scene. Li Haoqing was sitting cross-legged, like an old monk in meditation, as calm as an ancient well. The others' expressions didn't change much, and they were still as calm as before. Who are you? Zichen was still shouting in this space. He didn't see anyone. He also wanted to escape, but after running for a long time, he still couldn't get out of this place. He seemed to be trapped here, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't reach the end. As for that aged voice, it was still sounding. It seemed to be right beside him, yet also seemed to be very far away from him. Do you still know who you are? I am Zichen. Of course I know who I am. Have you lost your way? I haven't lost my way. I am Zichen. Zichen, who couldn't get out of this place, shouted hysterically. I know who I am. I am Zichen from the Saint Spirit realm. As he shouted this, the golden plate floating in the air suddenly released a strong light, like a golden seed, flew out from the surface, and disappeared into Zichen's forehead. The light around him suddenly brightened, and Cardemon, who had his eyes closed, seemed to be awakened, and he opened his eyes. At this time, the light had already disappeared into Zichen's forehead, but Cardemon didn't notice. A smug smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He reached into his bosom and took out a golden ball. He raised his head and looked at the golden plate above him, and a strange light flashed in his eyes, and he directly swallowed the golden ball. No one noticed this, and he closed his eyes again and began to comprehend. Zichen, who had just finished talking about the Saint Spirit realm, suddenly felt confused again. What did I just say? Where did I come from? You have lost your way, the old voice said. I am not lost. I am Zichen. Zichen from Bloody Battle City. Zichen shouted again. In the outside world, a second golden light appeared on the plate and disappeared into Zichen's mind. No one saw it. What did I just say? Zichen was suddenly stunned, and he actually forgot what he had just said. Then he said again, What did I come here to find? Ray after ray of golden light entered Zichen's sea of consciousness. With each ray of golden light, he would lose a part of his memory, until all of his memory was lost. At some point, the old voice disappeared. Zichen was still standing in that space, quietly standing there alone. His eyes were blank, and he was in a daze. After some time, Zichen gradually came back to his senses. Where am I? Someone was talking just now. Was I dreaming? Why am I dreaming again? But what did I dream of again? Zichen rubbed his head. Someone seems to be telling me that I have forgotten something, that I have lost something, but what exactly did I lose? Finally, Zichen's eyes became clear. I am Zichen. That's right, I am Zichen, the Zichen who killed the underworld ghost. Suddenly a hurricane appeared, and forced its way into the space where Zi-chan was. The hurricane wrapped around Zi-chin and disappeared. Or rather, Zi-chen's consciousness returned. The hurricane came from a powerful aura, and Zi-chin, who opened his eyes, noticed that the aura came from Carterman. He was shocked. Had Carterman awakened? Did he have the same ability as the underworld ghost? A powerful aura flowed around Carterman's body, and this aura was far stronger than everyone else's. Black light surrounded him, and he looked a little like the underworld ghost. He stood up and laughed loudly, waking everyone up. Of course, this was also intentional. When everyone opened their eyes, they were as shocked as Zi-chin. All right, it's all over. Caterman waved his hand, and the golden armor piece that was floating in the air returned to his hand. Carterman, what are you doing? Someone said with dissatisfaction. You bunch of idiots. Still want to comprehend? Save it. Carterman laughed sarcastically and said, From today onwards, all of you are my subordinates, and I am your leader. He looked around. In my place, there is no big leader or second leader. There is only one leader, and that is me. As he said that, he looked at Luke. Luke had just arrived, and he had only been in the second position for a few days, so these words were obviously directed at him. What do you mean by this? Luke looked at Carterman. Although you have broken through, it doesn't mean that we can't. Carterman laughed sarcastically. Break through my ass. He then looked at the others, including Zi-chin. Break through my ass. Not to mention that this thing belongs to me now. Even if I put it here for you to comprehend, you won't be able to break through even after thousands of years. Don't doubt me, do you know why? Everyone's expression changed. Because you lack the most important thing, so you can't break through it all. Carterman laughed sarcastically. Luke said in a low voice, Carterman, you dare to trick us? Carterman said with a dark expression, What did you just say? Give me back my devouring armor, and I will leave with my people now. Luke was clearly not afraid of Carterman and said indifferently, From now on, our people are officially leaving your team. Leaving? Carterman's eyes suddenly filled with murderous intent. You think you can leave just like that? Did you even ask me, the leader? As soon as he finished speaking, Carterman instantly reached out and pressed his palm directly on Luke's head. In the next moment, a devouring power surged out of Carterman's body, and Luke's awakened power was being drained away. It was as if he was being devoured by a ghost. But at this moment, Zi-chan was shocked to discover that there seemed to be an additional shadow of a ghost behind Carterman. Chapter 4045. Luke's soul power began to drain rapidly. His eyes were filled with fear. His body was also struggling, but it was useless. Upon seeing this, the men that he had brought with him immediately rushed forward, intending to save him. Those who go forward will die. The awakened ones on Carterman's side stepped forward and stopped those people. The light of power began to flow. In an instant, the situation here was divided into three: those who were facing each other and those who were currently neutral but were at a loss. The change happened so fast that they didn't have time to think before Carterman killed them. He used his true strength to tell everyone that after reaching the devouring realm, he could even devour his own people. At this moment, he clearly had the devouring divine ability, comparable to the ghost god. Qing-Yi looked at Zi-chin. She was very worried at this moment. Ibufan's face was very gloomy. This uncontrollable feeling made him feel very uncomfortable. It was as if he had returned to his former captivity, living a precarious life. And Carterman's forbearance and outburst, as well as the rapid change of mood, were the source of his uneasiness. Luke's power was draining, and it seemed that he would die at any moment. Leader, I think Luke already knows his mistake. Please let him go. At this moment, Zi-chan suddenly spoke. Hearing this, Carterman looked at Zi-chin, and a cold smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. You said he knows his mistake, and he knows his mistake? Seeing this, Luke quickly nodded, his eyes filled with the desire to live. Carterman smiled sarcastically and said again, "You said I should let him go, and I should let him go." Luke's heart suddenly sank. Zi Chen's expression changed slightly. He didn't expect Carterman's killing intent to be so heavy. The others' expressions also changed. Even those who were close to Zi Chen subconsciously took a step back, using this deliberate action to declare the boundary between them and Zichen. There were only a few people around Zichen. Carterman released his palm, and Luke's body fell to the ground, lifeless. He was dead. All of his power was devoured by Carterman. At this moment, the energy surging around Carterman became even more violent and powerful. He glanced at the crowd and said, "As expected, I'm no longer on the same level as all of you after reaching the devouring realm. Right now, I can kill all of you as easily as killing ants." Everyone kept quiet out of fear. Carterman's change was too unexpected. "From now on, I am your leader. If anyone dares to resist, there will only be one result." Carterman pointed at the corpse on the ground and said, "It's him." Obviously, he was going to die. "Greetings, leader." Seeing that, the crowd all bowed respectfully. At this moment, facing Carterman's oppressive might, everyone chose to submit. Carterman laughed proudly. This was the result he wanted. At this moment, everyone was feeling bitter in their hearts. They had met such a leader, but it was no different from when they were in the captivity. However, at this moment, Carterman's smile suddenly disappeared. "Why are you so slow?" Carterman's eyes stared at the grinning Oz. His eyes looked like they wanted to devour someone. Austin was stunned and said, "Big brother, it's me." In Card League, there is no big brother, only leader. Carterman's eyes became colder and colder. "Yes, leader." Oz was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He quickly clasped his fist and bowed. "It's too late." However, Carterman attacked again. He placed his palm on Oz's head, and the devouring power began to circulate. Oz's strength began to fade. "Leader, he's Oz, it's Oz." Carterman's subordinate, Alu, who had followed him for a long time, shouted. Previously, they were still supporting Carterman, blocking Luke's people and preventing them from attacking. Carterman turned around and stared at Alu. "You dare to question me?" He reached out again, and a devouring power fell on Aulu. Aulu's body flew forward uncontrollably. Seeing this, Zi Chen's expression changed again. After reaching the devouring realm, not only did Carterman have the devouring divine ability that was comparable to the ghost god, but he was also much stronger. Just as he said, they were no longer on the same level. The crowd was in an uproar. They did not expect Carterman to be so heartless. After breaking through, he did not even let his own people go. "What should we do?" Ibufan said in a low voice, "If we continue to stay here, we will also be devoured by him. Moreover, this guy only needs an excuse to devour. His original intention is to devour us and become stronger." Zi Qin had already noticed this. When he was devouring the two, Carterman's strength was increasing. On his crazy expression, there was a hint of intoxication. It was just like how the ghost god devoured the human soul. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings felt fear in their hearts. One by one, they retreated backward. Carterman seemed to have seen through their intentions. He smiled sinisterly. "What, you want to run? Do you think you can run?" He let go of his hand, and Oz fell to the ground. He was already dead. In the next moment, he took out the armor piece that had turned golden and activated it with the devouring power. A strange power spread out in all directions and spread into the distance. This energy was not threatening at all. It surged into the distance. Everyone was confused. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. A rumbling sound could be heard. It was the sound of heaven and earth collapsing. Just as everyone was puzzled, exclamations suddenly came from the outside world. After hearing the contents of the exclamations, Everyone's expression changed drastically. Someone rushed out of the room and looked outside. A tall wall appeared, extending into the distance. Everyone present was awakened. They had all experienced the threat of death. Naturally, they knew what the tall wall was. It was a place of captivity. They worked hard to break out of this place of captivity. Now it had appeared again. Moreover, there was no exit. It trapped everyone here. This guy. Ibufan gritted his teeth. His eyes were filled with anger. Clearly, the other party's intention to form an alliance was not pure. This was premeditated. Run. Now run. Carterman roared angrily. He moved forward and placed his palm on another awakened's head. He continued to devour. Zichen turned around and looked at Carterman. Behind him, the originally dim ghost god's figure became clearer and clearer. He had already devoured 3 people. This was the 4th. Some awakened roared and resisted. However, he was slapped away by Carterman. "I'll devour you later." Carterman glanced at him indifferently. Suddenly, Zichen's expression changed drastically as he looked at Carterman. Carterman's appearance was changing right now. Chapter 4046. The devouring power became stronger, and the devouring speed also became faster. Carterman could feel the increase in his power, and he was very excited. At this moment, another exclamation was heard. Hearing the exclamation, Carterman's eyes became cruel again. It seemed that after mastering the devouring power, he became more bloodthirsty. Suddenly, he saw that his palm was changing, and at the same time his entire arm was changing. It turned into a ghost claw. Isn't this a ghost? Fear appeared on his face, and he subconsciously took a few steps back. Those awakened ones were also looking at Carterman with fear. Not only his arm, his face was also changing, but the speed was not fast. "Ghost! Ghost!" One of the awakened ones shouted loudly. "Shut up!" Carterman roared. He subconsciously reached out his palm, and a devouring power fell on the awakened one's body. The awakened one struggled a few times and then fell to the ground. His soul fell into Carterman's palm, and then it was devoured by the power in his palm. With the replenishment of his power, Carterman became even more powerful. However, his arms and legs also turned into the appearance of a ghost at this time. Zichen's eyes widened, and he was shocked. Are all ghosts in the world transformed from humans? Qing Yi said in fear, and her teeth were chattering. If that was really the case, then it was too scary. Those who follow me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die. Carterman's eyes coldly swept around. Now, who dares to run? Everyone stood still, and no one dared to run. Carterman grinned, as if he was very satisfied with everyone's performance. His face was about to turn into a ghost. At this moment, an ordinary person rushed in and shouted, "Lord, it's not good outside." When he saw Carterman in front of him, he was so scared that he couldn't say anything else, and he stepped back in fear. "Die!" Carterman roared, and then he opened his mouth and sucked and devoured the other person's soul. Following this soul entrance, Carterman completely turned into a ghost. If it wasn't for his black eyes, no one would believe that he was once a human. How can this be? Carterman reached out his hands that turned into ghost claws, and there was a hint of pain in his black eyes. How can this be? I'm a human. How did I become a ghost? The surroundings were silent, and no one dared to answer him. Perhaps if he opened his mouth now, he would die. Carterman had become a true specter. I see. Suddenly, Carterman began to laugh loudly. The black light in his eyes gradually dissipated. Only dark ghosts possess such great power. Only by becoming a ghost can I become stronger. He had completely lost the rationality of a human, and his entire person had become as cruel as a ghost. Do you want to become as strong as me? Carterman suddenly looked at an awakened beside him. The awakened didn't know how to answer and was stunned. Do you want to have the devouring god art? Carterman asked again. His voice was low and filled with killing intent. The other party didn't know whether to nod or shake his head. Carterman stretched out his hand, and a beam of energy flew out from his palm and landed on the awakened. Suddenly, a powerful aura burst out from the awakened one's body. Then, a devouring power appeared. His previously hesitant eyes had turned cold. He rushed forward in an instant, arriving in front of a hunter and slammed his palm down. He began to devour the hunter. The others' expressions changed greatly. They retreated again, but they didn't dare to run. This awakened had only devoured 2 people before taking on the appearance of a specter. There were now 2 specter in the field. Carterman looked at the specter. How do you feel now? The specter nodded and said, I can always rely on devouring to become stronger. The human body is too weak. It can't withstand such great power at all. Carterman looked at everyone. What do you choose? Everyone looked at each other. They were humans to begin with. Now that they had to give up their human body and become a specter, it seemed like no one could accept it. Qingyi, who was standing beside Zichen, tightly held onto Zichen's arm. I don't want to become a specter. I don't want to die. Why not be a human? Why become a ghost? Ibufan coldly snorted. However, his expression was also very serious. Of course, Zichen didn't want to become a specter either. He signaled them to retreat. The current Carterman was too strong. He didn't have the confidence to win. Suddenly, Carterman looked at Zichen. Zichen, what do you choose? Life or death? Zichen said in a deep voice. Of course, I choose to become a human. Then you're courting death? A pressure swept over from the front. Carterman, it's your choice to become a specter. I only want to become a human. Let us leave. From now on, we won't interfere with each other's business, Zichen said. Interfere with each other's business? Are you worthy? Carterman suddenly stepped forward. Zichen only saw a blur in front of his eyes before his neck was grabbed by Carterman. Let go of Zichen! Qingyi shouted. She, who was frightened before, now started to attack Carterman. However, it was useless. In the next moment, her neck was also grabbed by Carterman. Ibufan and Li Haoqing saw this and immediately took action. They each held their weapons. Get lost! Carterman roared angrily. He directly threw Qingyi out like a weapon, sending the 2 flying. Everyone, if you don't want to die, we can only work together now. Zichen, who was grabbed by the neck, said with some difficulty. Hearing this, many people's faces changed. Their eyes flickered. Carterman smiled coldly and said, I'll give you the power of devour. Go and kill all those who resist. Carterman waved his hand again. Several rays of light shot out from his body and went to the sides. Among the people who followed him, 5 people received this power. Then a powerful aura was released. These 5 people instantly received the power of devour. Again, Carterman attacked again. This time, several people received the power of devour. After receiving the power of devour, they began to devour the awakened ones nearby. In an instant, the surroundings were in chaos. Carterman looked at Zichen. He smiled coldly and said, As for you, I'm sorry. I don't plan to let you become one of us. Go to hell. A wave of devour emerged from Carterman's palm and rushed toward Zichen. Swoosh! Suddenly, a black light appeared and slashed toward Carterman's neck. It's Hope. Its sneak attack didn't succeed. Carterman sneered, Beast, I've been waiting for you. He grabbed Hope tightly. A powerful force suppressed it and made it unable to move. Zichen's power began to fade. His consciousness gradually became blurry. Zichen! Qingyi shouted and rushed forward. However, she was stopped by Ibufan. Don't go. Zichen can't hold on anymore. Li Haoqing stepped forward without hesitation. In his memory, Zichen was his grandson. However, in the next moment, a person appeared in front of him and blocked his path. His power and soul were being devoured. Zichen's consciousness was becoming blurry. It seemed like he was about to die. Facing the crisis of death again, Zichen was helpless, because there was a huge difference in power between them. Cardamon's power was suppressing him. At this moment, only death was waiting for Zichen. The others all ran away. No one wanted to die here. Zichen's soul had been extracted from his body and was about to be devoured. Cardamon laughed loudly. Hope, who was in his other hand, was also struggling. Suddenly, a ray of light flew out from Hope's body. This ray of light flew toward Zichen and landed on his body before disappearing. It was like a power was injected into his body. Or perhaps some kind of power that had been sealed for a long time was suddenly activated. At this moment in Zichen's mind, a voice that sounded like a great bell rang out. Dark Ghost Devour Soul. The power that originally existed in Zichen's body began to circulate according to a certain trajectory. This was the circulation of a cultivation method. Chapter 4047. Just as the technique appeared in Zichen's mind, the energy in his body started to flow according to a certain path. The change happened very quickly. The energy flowed according to the path, and the energy that Zichen had devoured by Cardamon returned to Zichen's body. It was like returning. At the same time, the technique that Zichen was using started to devour the energy that belonged to Cardamon. An even more powerful devouring power, with a hint of savagery, started to devour Cardamon's energy that was close to him. It was like being crushed. Such a change caused Cardamon to cry out in shock, and there was fear in his eyes. His devouring power was no longer effective. Moreover, the energy in his body was also being devoured by Zichen uncontrollably. Zichen stood there without moving, and there was a blank look in his eyes, as if he was subconsciously controlling the energy. The scene in front of him seemed to have happened somewhere before, and it gave him a familiar feeling. It was as if he had experienced the same thing at some point in time. It was just that he couldn't remember when and where it had happened. Cardamon's energy was rapidly depleting, and he was about to let go of his hand and retreat in fear. Right now, he didn't have the heart to devour, and he only wanted to save his life. Suddenly, a powerful devouring power erupted from Hope's body, who was being held in his hand. Cardamon's retreating body stopped, and he stood there without moving like a statue, and the powerful energy in his body was continuously devouring Zichen and Hope. Such a change caused the expressions of the people in the distance to change greatly, and they didn't know what to do. The battle in the surroundings stopped, and everyone looked over, not knowing what had happened. Because, in their perception, the one who was devouring right now wasn't Cardamon, but Zichen. Why was Zichen able to devour Cardamon's energy? Qing Yi, who was being pulled back by Ibu Fan, saw the scene, but she didn't know whether to be happy or worried. Could it be that Zichen was going to follow in Cardamon's footsteps and become a ghost? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and leave. Once Zichen becomes a ghost, he will kill everyone. Ibu Fan reacted and pulled Qing Yi back again. Qing Yi didn't move. She stood there, staring blankly at Zichen. If she was really going to die here today, she was willing to accept the fact that she was going to die at the hands of Zichen. The devouring power emitted from Zichen's body was extremely powerful. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to suppress Cardamon's devouring power. Soon, under the devouring of both him and Hope, Cardamon stopped breathing. The hand that was tightly gripping Zichen's neck had no choice but to let go. Zichen stood there motionless. Hope fell to the ground. Its whole body was emitting a black light, and streams of devouring power were circulating around its body. For some reason, it had also awakened its devouring power, and the aura it released was very strong. Compared to Cardamon, who had turned into a ghost, The current hope seemed more like a ghost. Chen still stood there without moving, but the powerful energy around his body made others not dare to approach him. At this moment, many images appeared in Chen's mind. He didn't know if these images were real or just illusions. Among them, a woman asked him if he had mastered the dark, ghost-devouring soul technique. However, the voice kept drifting, and it was mixed with other voices. Li Haoqing looked at the motionless Chen, and after hesitating for a while, he shouted. Hearing this shout, Chen came back to his senses. All the images and voices in his mind disappeared, and he regained his consciousness. He saw the dead Carterman, then looked at his own hands, and then at his own body. In a short period of time, he knew what had happened. He had awakened the dark, ghost-devouring soul technique at the crucial moment and devoured Carterman instead. As for how he awakened it, or was it an epiphany? Chen guessed that it was caused by another life and death crisis. Hope came in front of Chen and raised its head to look at Chen carefully. Its eyes seemed to be filled with expectation. Chen waved his hand, indicating for Hope to come up. The expectation in Hope's eyes turned into disappointment, and it jumped onto Chen's shoulder. Chen turned around and looked at the others. Everyone, subconsciously, stepped back. Carterman had almost invincible strength, but he was still devoured by Chen. In that case, was Chen going to start devouring others just like Carterman? Chen's gaze swept across everyone's faces, and he saw everyone's fear and anxiety. At the same time, he also knew why Carterman would do such a crazy thing. It was because after he had mastered the power of devouring, a strong thought appeared in his mind. That thought was to devour everyone in front of him. It was like a beggar who had been hungry for a long time and saw a table full of food, or a traveler in the desert who saw a clear pool of water. This kind of attraction was extremely strong, and it constantly attacked his soul. Even Chen's breathing became hurried at this moment. If it wasn't for his extremely high self-control, he might have followed in Carterman's footsteps. After retracting his gaze, Chen turned around, squatted down, and searched the dead Carterman's body. Soon he found the golden armor piece, and he held it in his hand. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Was Chen going to announce that he was the leader? The previous battle had already shattered the buildings here, so there were many people watching from afar. "You're free." Chen said such a sentence, and his expression gradually calmed down. At the same time, he activated the black devouring power, and the towering wall that originally appeared fell back into the ground. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they cheered. After that, they began to flee in all directions. No one was willing to stay here, because if they stayed here, they might be devoured. Those awakened ones looked at Chen in disbelief. Suddenly, Chen moved. He quickly rushed forward, and a weapon appeared in his hand. It was a bone knife, and he slashed forward. Uft! The second wraith fell, and its body was almost cut in half. Previously, it was still thinking of sneaking away. Those awakened ones who were about to leave were stunned again. They stood there, not daring to move. Obtaining the power of devouring isn't necessarily a bad thing, but as long as you suppress the devouring heart and don't devour humans, you shouldn't become wraith. Chen looked at the awakened ones around and said indifferently, "From now on, all of you will follow me." At this moment, the bone knife in Chen's hand was still dripping with blood. Those awakened ones who possessed the power of devouring couldn't help but change their expressions when they heard that. Chapter 40-48. The crisis seemed to have been resolved just like that. However, all the hunters still felt uneasy. Carterman's previous actions were still vivid in their minds. Not only had he become much stronger, but he had also become ferocious by nature. Now that Chen had replaced him, no one dared to believe him. Those hunters who had been strengthened by Carterman's devouring power were also terrified. In fact, they were suffering the most. On one hand, they had to control their emotions and did not dare to casually devour others around them. On the other hand, they had to be on guard against Zichen killing them. Therefore, they felt very uncomfortable. Qing Yi, on the other hand, trusted Zichen. Just when no one dared to approach Zichen, she came to Zichen's side and looked at him from head to toe. Then she asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Zichen shook his head and said, "From the looks of it, as long as I don't devour others, I'll be fine." Then he looked at the others and said, "But the premise is that you can suppress the thought of devouring in your heart." Qing Yi looked at the other hunters and asked, "What should we do with these people?" Those hunters were all normal people. They would not devour others. At this moment, they were still worried that others would devour them. They were living very nervously. After thinking for a moment, Zichen looked at Ibufan and said, "You take the others and leave." Ibufan's expression changed several times. "How do you know I'm leaving?" Zichen smiled and did not say anything. Ibufan asked again, "Where should we go?" "Where can we go?" "Let's go to the place where we used to live. It's safer there," Zichen said. "Take the others with you." At this moment, many ordinary people had already fled. Obviously, they were also afraid. Zichen said again, "Go and find the others. Without the protection of hunters, they won't be able to live for long." Ibufan did not have any objection to this. At the same time, it proved that Zichen still maintained absolute rationality. The other hunters looked at Zichen in a new light. After all, in everyone's impression, Zichen was just a man with a devouring armor. He was a man of few words and rarely talked to them. At the same time, they felt grateful in their hearts. "You should leave too." Zichen looked at Li Haoqing and Qing Yi. "All of you follow Ibufan." Li Haoqing opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. "I'm not leaving. I want to follow you," Qing Yi said without hesitation. At this moment, she was very worried that Zichen was only temporarily suppressing his devouring power. Once they left, Zichen would lose his original nature. The other awakened ones who had mastered the devouring power obviously had the same concerns. At this moment, all of them were looking at Zichen, waiting for Zichen's reply to Qing Yi. During this period of time, the over 10 devourers used their gazes to silently communicate with each other. Zichen shook his head and said firmly, "No." Right after he said those words, the dozen or so devourers immediately scattered in all directions. All of them ran in different directions. Zichen's expression suddenly changed. He shouted, "Ibufan, protect everyone!" After saying that, Zichen held the bone knife in his hand and chased after one of the devourers. That devourer had already rushed into the crowd. As he passed by, he opened his mouth and sucked, devouring one of the devourer's souls. He couldn't hold it in any longer. When he saw those ordinary people, he couldn't hold it in any more, because as long as he opened his mouth and sucked, a delicious soul would come to him. Just by devouring one person, his body had undergone some changes. His strength had obviously become stronger, and he was also one step closer to becoming a ghost. Zichen's target was him. Such an unforeseen event was beyond everyone's expectations. Everyone was on high alert. Only now did Qing Yi realize that her insistence on staying behind had brought her a disaster. If they had left earlier, these people could have followed Zichen obediently. Not to mention whether they would become better in the future. At least none of them would die now. But now, 2 of them couldn't control themselves and started devouring. Zichen's bone knife left his hand and flew forward like a streak of light. Puff! The devourer's back was pierced through. His body staggered for dozens of steps before falling to the ground. He was dead. Zichen arrived in front of the devourer, pulled out the bone knife, and rushed toward the second devourer who was about to become a ghost. During this time, Zi-Chan passed by many people, but he didn't even look at them. However, those people were still extremely terrified. They screamed and retreated. A moment later, Zi-Chan returned after killing the second devourer. The other devourers ran away. Perhaps they were afraid of Zi-Chan, but when they left, they didn't dare to devour others. However, as long as they were out of Zi-Chan's sight, nothing could be certain. When Zi-Chan returned, he saw that Ibu Fan and the others were staring ahead vigilantly. There was still one person who hadn't run away. Zi-Chan was a little surprised. Seeing Zi-Chan's arrival, Ibu Fan heaved a sigh of relief. Zi-Chan waved his hand and said, "You guys go back. Be careful of the others." Ibu Fan was a little hesitant. Zi-Chan continued, "Actually, the strength of a devourer isn't that strong. Once many of you join forces, you can definitely kill it. After all, you can even kill a ghost. Why should you be afraid of a devourer?" Everyone felt that it made sense and nodded. They also felt more confident. Zi-Chan was right. As long as they joined forces, they could definitely kill a devourer. However, it wouldn't be as easy as Zi-Chan said. They still had to pay a price. However, Zi-Chan couldn't say that. Otherwise, a random devourer could easily disband this team of dozens of devourers. Everyone left, including Qing-Yi. Zi-Chan stood there. Next to him was the devourer who didn't escape. He was also a young man. He looked even younger than Zi-Chan. After everyone left, Zi-Chan looked at the young man and asked, "Why didn't you run away?" The young man said, "I don't want to become a ghost." Zi-Chan asked, "What does that have to do with running away?" "I don't have such strong willpower. If I encounter other humans, I'll definitely devour them. However, your willpower is very strong. If I follow you, I can also train my willpower with your combat strength." The young man said confidently, "I believe that I won't become a ghost." "What's your name?" Zi-Chan didn't ask what would happen if the young man failed. It was obvious that if he failed, he would kill him. "I'm Angus." The young man Angus said, "I was following Luke." Zi-Chan nodded and then walked forward. He was walking in the direction where Ibu Fan and the others had left. Angus followed him and asked curiously, "Why are we following them?" "To escort them and see if we can find one or two unlucky fellows," Zi-Chan replied calmly. Angus smiled. The reason why he was willing to follow Zi-Chan was that when Luke was in danger, no one spoke up. Only Zi-Chan spoke up for Luke. After that incident, Zi-Chan clearly had the opportunity to become the new leader. However, he let everyone go. Even though he clearly had the reason and opportunity to devour those damned hunters, he still didn't. It was obvious that he was a good person. Moreover, his willpower was very strong. He didn't want to become a ghost either. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.